Apparently it is, but I don't know why. Hold on. Talk now.
Yep.
You're good now. I didn't have to change anything. Everything was fine. Now you're bouncing in the audio mixer. My bad.
We good?
We're good. Go for it.
All right. We good. Welcome to the Deeper Dive presented by SuperDraft.io or download it in the App Store. I'll get to that in just a moment. Got a 4-game slate to talk about. Adam, I'm going to run this back because he deserves a shout out.
Yeah.
Scott Martin on Twitter at _Toonslinger did a phenomenal cartoon of all of us, including you and me and Josh and Alex and Eddie. And you should check it out on Twitter. You should like that tweet, show him some love. It's a really good job that he did. And amazingly, we all look at least pretty much like ourselves.
Yeah, we were all pretty quickly able to figure out who was who. So yeah, I thought it was pretty awesome.
It was. Josh says, maybe I shouldn't even say that. I don't know the sensitivity levels anymore, but it was a really good job, and I appreciate you for that, Scott. I might just use that as my banner on Twitter, maybe even an avatar. We'll see. Anyway, glad to have everyone with us. Before we jump into it, let's shout out our sponsor, SuperDraft. SuperDraft.io. You can see the logo in the top right hand side of your screen, or you can download it in the App Store as well. They've been running some pretty big contests lately. $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 up top tonight. Only a 4-game slate, but still $5,000 to first place, $25,000 jump shot. And you can get $20 in free super cash simply by signing up with the promo code Awesemo, AWESEMO, and depositing $100 or more. So you deposit $100, you immediately get $20 into your account to be used on the site to play and win real money. And what makes it different is there's no salaries on SuperDraft. If you've been here for a while, you know this. If you're new, it's unique. James Harden, Russell Westbrook tonight, 1x. Whatever they score, let's say they both score 60, that's all they get. But De'Aaron Fox, 1.35. Stephen Curry, 1.45. Not suggesting these guys, just throwing out some numbers. If they score 40 fantasy points, they get 1.45 times their actual production. So if you want to play all the top guys, you can, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the best move, which is why strategy kicks in pretty heavily and makes it a whole lot of fun filling out this 7-man roster. So check it out, superdraft.io, or download it in the App Store. Be sure to use the promo code Awesemo when you sign up. Get your free $20 when you deposit, and take down that top first place $5,000 prize today in the $25,000 jump shot. All right, dude, let's jump into it. You and I actually did the early bird last night, so we got a relatively early look at this one before doing today's show. Only 4 games, and I think some of the injury news is starting to come into focus, but we're still waiting on a few pieces that could have a huge impact on such an abbreviated slate.
Yeah, for sure. Basically, the entire Raptors team. Golden State, we have an idea of who's playing. It's just a matter of, how many minutes, I guess, to give them. And then also, needing to know who's starting at center for Charlotte, who is starting, I guess, for Philadelphia. So, yeah, a lot of moving parts still.
Let's kick it off. We've got, oh, by the way, people are wondering about the mustache already. So full disclosure, it's done. But we've agreed that I'm not going to see this mustache until tomorrow morning on the strategy show, 9:30 Eastern time in the morning. Adam already saw it. I walked away from my desk, and Adam already saw it. So if you had to give the audience an idea, just a glimpse inside the face right now of Josh Engelman, how would you describe how he looks?
If you went to a college that had a hockey team, think of the douchiest looking player on the hockey team.
Okay. All right.
If you didn't have a hockey team, then frats will work also.
All right. Yeah. And we're trying to stay somewhat PG here. But you didn't seem that shocked by it. And he actually appears to be, I think he's trying to play me here because he keeps telling me he likes it. Right? He's like, oh, I might actually shave more in the future. This has got to be him playing down the severity of this lost bet.
I don't know. I think I could see where Josh thinks it looks good for Josh.
Well, Brian Buckley says my mom really wants to date Josh, so that's good. Not my mom, his mom.
Congrats, Josh.
There you go, Josh. Hit up Mrs. Buckley, bro. see what she's got in store. All right. Anyway, tomorrow morning, it's Stephen J official. I said what Twitter page? It's just go to mine at Lafayette_D. I retweeted it. You'll see it. But anyway, let's get into it. We got plenty to talk about. Charlotte and Denver. Denver Nuggets 10-point favorites coming off a brutal home loss to the Golden State Warriors. I expect them to steamroll Charlotte tonight. We'll see what Devontae Graham's status is soon enough. I right now actually don't have him playing. Bismack Biyombo is doubtful as well. Do you have Graham in or out?
I have him in for right now. I don't feel strongly one way or the other, but I have him in for now.
Okay. So let's start with the Charlotte Hornets. This game, by the way, we were spot on. I think I said 206. You said 208 last night. It's 207.
It was 208 this morning.
And it opened at 208. Yeah. So I'm not giving you that. We'll split the difference.
Hang on, quick question. Where did you say Biyombo was doubtful?
Yes.
Okay. Because he's not on the injury report.
All right. Well, I have him as, hold on a second.
Not that it matters. I just, it obviously matters as far as the starting lineup potentially, but
I'll tell you where I got it from Basketball Monster.
Yeah, it's entirely possible. One of their beat writers said it, and I didn't see it.
But. Yeah, but no, it's not official. I can't imagine they would list him as doubtful if it was just like a DNPCD. But I think in this case, that's what they're referring to.
And either way, if he starts, he's obviously playing. If he doesn't start, I assume he's not playing.
Right. And I think the reason they listed this, because you normally wouldn't see something like that. I think the reason they listed this is because it actually has an impact on guys like Cody Zeller and the rest of the rotation if he doesn't play. And Borrego's been very difficult to predict with the bigs, particularly his centers. So that would be my guess. But as far as like getting news, I think the news that we'd be waiting for is more than anything, just like you said, is Zeller or Biyombo starting? And then we can pretty much glean everything we need from that. Would you agree?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So let's get into it. We'll run the scenarios with and without Graham. So let's assume Devontae Graham is in. That definitely takes some shine away from anything that may have had even the smallest glimmer. What are you thinking on the backcourt? Guys like Rozier and Graham, Malik Monk suspended. We know that. Cody Martin with Graham in becomes a lot less appealing. I don't know. I'm hoping Graham doesn't play, but I'm not sure how much of a difference it makes in terms of them actually producing tonight.
Right. I'm hoping he does play just so I don't end up with more Terry Rozier than I want. But if he's in, I think that his price tag is cheap enough at 5,800 on DraftKings that you could take some shots in tournaments, but I still wouldn't be overly confident. It's not a very appealing matchup. It should be a really slow-paced game. I talked about it this morning with Ben that I think the way Graham's been producing lately is more in line with what you should expect from him than that hot start that he got off to this season. Like, I don't view Devontae Graham being in a prolonged slump. I view it as he started the season out really, really hot, and now he's come back to the player that he is. So, the salary now is cheap enough where at least he has a ceiling based on how many minutes he plays. But you're talking about, a 0.85 to 0.9 fantasy point per minute guy in a tough matchup. So, still, kind of keeping my expectations in check there. It would knock the assist percentage for Terry Rozier down. Rozier and Graham both get a bump in usage without Monk, but if Graham's in, it obviously makes Rozier a little bit less appealing as well.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, it's hard to get away from Rozier if Graham doesn't play, because with Graham off the court this year, Rozier is a 26.5% usage guy. He's a 31% assist rate player. He has a 1.15 or so fantasy points per minute. So, when you prorate that across the 35 minutes you're projecting him for, it's hard to not get Terry Rozier in your lineups as a result.
Right. Like, if I quickly just adjusted the rates a little bit, like to account for Graham being out, and it added like it had like 3 or 4 DraftKings points to Rozier, so it definitely makes a big difference there.
What if Graham is out? I mean, let's just talk about that then. It adds several fantasy points. Would you say 3 or 4?
Yeah.
With that being the case, on a 4-game slate, where does Rozier rank for you?
So the problem you're still going to run into, and Ben and I talked about it a lot this morning, especially with it being a 4-game slate, is ownership's going to increase as well, substantially if Graham is out. So it makes Rozier a better play as far as projection goes. I'm not really sure it gives you a really big edge, though, if the ownership just skyrockets. Like, you still have guys priced around him, like Jamal Murray, for example, on the other side of this game that I think, even if Graham is out, have a very similar ceiling to Rozier, and I would prefer if they're lower owned. So I'd still be really aware of the projected ownership. This is still a tough matchup against Denver. It's still a really inefficient Charlotte offense. It's
super slow game.
Yeah, incredibly slow game. Like, there's still a lot of things working against everyone in this game. So while the projection jumps, you still want to be sure that the ownership isn't increasing by too much with it.
Yeah, I'm with you. Even on a short slate, I wouldn't be viewing him as a crucial option. Dead last in pace this season is the Charlotte Hornets. You know who's nipping at their heels? I'll tell you, it's the Denver Nuggets. They're 30th and 29th on the season. So it's already a bad Hornets team that has an implied total of 98.5. I mean, that's 8 points lower than the next closest team. It's the Sixers, who don't have Embiid, who don't have Simmons, and don't have Josh Richardson. So, and the Hornets are playing at home. I mean, it's ugly, dude.
Yeah, for sure.
What are you doing with Zeller if he starts?
I really like Zeller if he starts. He was really popular last game and disappointed. I mean, he was still okay for a salary, but he only played 19 minutes against the Spurs. Right now, we have him on DraftKings projected for like 7% ownership or somewhere in that range. 6.5% ownership. He's 4,300 there. I think this matchup against Denver is a lot more appealing than the one against the Spurs. If you go and look at the rotations in that game, Zeller he picked up his second foul with 3 minutes and 7 seconds left in the first half. So he subbed out there. Assume that he doesn't pick up that foul. He gets those extra 3 minutes. And then the Hornets closed this game with Miles Bridges, PJ Washington, Rozier, McDaniels, and Caleb Martin. So they closed small against a Spurs team that had Rudy Gay, DeJounte Murray, Bryn Forbes, Trey Lyles, and DeMar DeRozan on the floor. Now you're talking about a Denver team that, assuming this game is competitive, has Nikola Jokic in there, and Mason Plumlee obviously playing the center minutes when Jokic isn't on the floor. I think you get a lot closer to 48 minutes combined from Zeller plus Hernan Gomez in this matchup than you do against the Spurs or than you do against smaller teams. So I think that assuming he starts, I think expecting something like 26 minutes from Zeller is very reasonable here.
So if he starts,
if he doesn't start, then that all applies to Biyombo as well.
Right. So if Biyombo starts, are you projecting him for 24 minutes, like you said?
I'd go to like 26 on him. I'm going 26 on whoever starts at center for Charlotte.
Okay. Ballsy move, fella.
Yeah, well, I'm sure. I mean, it's the Hornets. It'll never come back to bite me.
No, of course not. Hernan Gomez will end up playing 30. That's what we'll get.
Yeah, I mean, I have him at 18 minutes, so even he looks like an okay value.
He's actually played quite well in the limited minutes.
Yeah, I mean, he always produces. It's just that he's a defensive liability, and he can't be on the floor for competitive teams. But obviously, that's not the case here, so it doesn't matter.
No, it shouldn't matter at all. And who knows what the score of this game is going to be like at halftime. Anything else for the Hornets? Well, actually, if Graham is out, can you get back to a Cody Martin, who was in tournament winning lineups the other day? Wasn't fantastic by any stretch, but also had 28 DraftKings points, didn't kill you, played 34 minutes. He shot 6 for 8. So I'd be cautious about an inefficient game where he shoots, 1 for 6 and you're feeling pretty awful about things.
Yeah, I don't really see the upside for those fringe guys, even if Graham is out now that the salaries have come up. I thought 4,100 was a little too expensive for Martin. And like you said, he shot 75% from the field, which is nowhere near what you should expect from him on a normal basis. But now at 4,500, it's just really, really tough for him to put up a score that you need to have there. Jalen McDaniels played big minutes last game, him and Caleb Martin both in the mid-20s. 3,600 and 3,400 for McDaniels and Caleb Martin. If Graham is out, those are the two I would rather roll the dice on, just because they're $1,000 cheaper, give or take. But either way, it's not like you'd be really confident in them either.
Okay. Let's talk about the Nuggets. So 16-point home loss to the Warriors. Now they travel to Charlotte to face, arguably the second worst team in the league. I'm expecting them to get back on track here for sure. We'll start with Nikola Jokic. He could be going up against Zeller. He could be going up against the Zeller, Hernan Gomez tandem. Like you said, they should get the 48 minutes. Maybe Biyombo gets some run. Who knows? Likely going to be a DNP-CD, though, if Cody Zeller starts. How are we approaching somebody like Nikola Jokic, who on DraftKings is $9,500? He's $9,900 on FanDuel. So he's sub 10K on both sites on a shorter slate. And while he's been fine lately, but this price tag, when you look at his production, just given ownership recently and output, it's not that crazy that he would be 95 or 9,900.
Yeah, I think the price is pretty much where it should be. The thing that right now makes him look kind of difficult to get to for me is that the ownership is in line. It's not that far behind guys like Kawhi or Russell Westbrook, who I think look even better. So the pace here does play a role. You mentioned how slow this game should be. I expect Jokic to have plenty of success. I don't think that the Hornets can defend him. It's just, how the limited possessions. But on top of that, with Mason Plumlee being back, we've seen the playing time come back down to earth as we expected. He was getting 36 to 38 minutes per game when Plumlee was out. For the season, he's averaged about 31 minutes per game with Plumlee in. Even if you give him, let's say, 33 here, I still don't think he looks quite as good as those other players in that price range that I mentioned. And right now, at least, the ownership is still getting to Jokic. So if his ownership were to go from 25% now down to like 10% or something around lock, then he starts to become a lot more appealing. But as is, I just have trouble getting to him as opposed to just playing even more of Kawhi or Westbrook or Harden.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised to see him above that 25% range, but there he is. On FanDuel, he's at what, 33%, 32%, something crazy. So he's definitely up there. Can you get any excitement towards guys like, and I mentioned this only because of the size of the slate and their price points, a $4,600 Millsap, very cheap. Barton's $5,600 running across this lineup here. Michael Porter Jr.'s minutes just haven't been there. But a few of these guys are inexpensive. I keep coming back to the pace of this game. The points will still be scored. Someone will likely still have, an above average outing. Jamal Murray, 4,800 or 6,800. So you have some relatively affordable players, but in context of the rest of the slate, what can you really do with them?
Yeah, I think that they're all, solid options at their pricing. You talked about Jokic, I think, being pretty correctly priced. Millsap, the same thing, played 26 minutes, got the start last game and played 26 minutes. He should have success in this matchup. He's only 4,600, but he's also projected to be the seventh highest owned guy on DraftKings. For example, I would rather pivot to a $4,300 Cody Zeller at 1/3 the ownership or 1/4 the ownership. I think they project really similarly, and you're just getting fewer people going to Zeller. The same goes for Murray right now. I think I like him. He played 37 minutes last game. He typically in competitive games is going to play at least 34 or 35, and he's pretty cheap. So I think he looks good. I think, maybe a little bit underowned. For example, if Graham is in, I would rather go to Jamal Murray than Terry Rozier, and we have them projected for similar ownership at the same price point. If Graham is out, then I think Murray becomes a really logical pivot to the increased ownership on Rozier.
What about Jamal Murray? He's coming in at relatively high ownership right now in the top 10 or so range on DraftKings, or I'm sorry, FanDuel, where he's priced at 6,600 on DraftKings. Jamal Murray is at 18.8%, also around that top 10 range at 6,800.
Yeah. I think that if he's going to be owned about the same as Rozier and Graham is out or Graham is in, then I like Murray more. I think he's the pivot to Rozier if Graham is ruled out.
Anything else from Denver?
I don't think so. Plumlee's someone that I play a lot of, but his price tags come up enough where it's starting to get tough to get there.
All right, let's talk about Houston and the LA Clippers. Houston opened as slight 1-point favorites. They're now 1-point dogs. So I would expect this to be a dogfight for sure. 237 total, easily the highest on this slate by almost 12 points, 11.5 points. Not a surprise whatsoever. You've got a ridiculously potent three-point shooting team in the Houston Rockets. Although it's funny because if you watched against the Knicks the other night, you can see what happens when they don't shoot well. They can lose to teams like the Knicks. Now, I think it's fluky. They're coming off an overtime victory at TD Garden against Boston. But at the same time, you saw that this Houston team is so dependent on three-point shooting that they're not going to – they don't really have much recourse when that's not working. So I think I think it's less to be concerned about. I expect a very high-scoring game, and I expect guys like Westbrook and Harden to get theirs tonight. Covington probably ends up being okay, but his price tag begins rising considerably, and now you've really got to ask yourself whether it's worth it. And don't laugh, but PJ Tucker on DraftKings specifically is $3,700. He's only center eligible, which is, something to discuss, but you are getting 35 or so minutes or more from him in close games. And I suppose you could do worse if a lot of value doesn't open up and many of these questionable players end up being in. Go ahead.
The problem is, other than the obvious that it's PJ Tucker, is that he's projected to be the 5th highest owned guy on DraftKings. He's just one of those guys where
brutal.
Right. Like I never end up playing him, in part because he's a low usage guy, but also because it's like the spots where he actually is useful because he's cheap. There's not a lot of value on this slate, and there's guys to pay up for. Everyone knows that, and he ends up.
You mentioned this last night on the early bird before we had any ownership. You had pointed out that on paper he's not he's in a vacuum. PJ Tucker's not a terrible play because he's almost minimum salary. Anyone playing the center with 35 plus minutes, but I believe, and I'm just paraphrasing, but you had said that the ownership is what takes you off of such a low upside guy like him every time it's a small slate.
Yeah, and in addition to that, since Robert Covington, in the games that Westbrook and Harden have both played since Covington joined the team, Tucker only has a 9.4% rebounding percentage. For comparison, Robert Covington is at 14.6%. Westbrook's at 11.2%. So you're not getting tons of rebounding from Tucker, at least to this point. A lot of that's going to Covington. Obviously, he's never a high usage guy. He's kind of just out there and he's cheap. And, obviously you can run into production if you're playing 35 minutes at that price tag. But if a quarter of the field is waiting for that to happen, I think there's a bigger edge in going to other guys, whether it's even Daniel House, who played 30 minutes last game and is only $300 more expensive and half the ownership, or looking on the other side of this game to someone that I think is a good tournament value in JaMychal Green. I just don't really think I'll be getting to a lot of PJ Tucker here. If he's the value guy that breaks open the slate, I'm not going to win. But the reason is that, at 25% ownership, obviously it's a low probability that he breaks the slate open. And if he does, I'm still competing with so many lineups that I think the edge is still bigger, just hoping that, 25% of the field plays him and he scores like 17 points or something.
Okay. I mean, right now there just really is not a lot of solid value on this slate at all.
I would just rather find $600 for Zeller, who is starting, by the way. I'd rather take a lower owned, cheaper JaMychal Green. I'd rather take a lower owned Daniel House. I'd rather take I think he's lower owned.
Who?
Eric Gordon.
Eric Gordon?
Yeah.
Lower owned than who?
He's a little bit lower owned too.
Than who?
Than Tucker.
Yeah, 15.8% we've got him at.
Yeah. And again, it's not to say that I love Eric Gordon or I love House or I'm super confident in Green, but I think they all project really similarly to PJ Tucker, and Tucker is the one that everyone wants to play.
I don't know if they want to play him. I think
everyone
people are,
play.
I think people are going to feel like they need to play him.
Yeah, that's true. I don't think anyone ever wakes up like, oh, sweet, PJ Tucker tonight. Let's go.
Well, I know someone. All right. What about the rest of Houston? The backcourt specifically.
Yeah, I think that. So this morning we had Harden and Westbrook 1 and 2 in ownership at about the same ownership. Now we have them at 2 and 3 with Harden starting to pick up a little bit more than Westbrook. That's typically what we've seen lately when the pricing on these two is pretty close. And I think that's a result of not paying a ton of attention to how things have gone recently with the changes to this team. So I think they project really similarly. I have Harden, like a point or so higher than Westbrook. But if Harden's going to be a little bit higher owned and a little bit more expensive, I like going to Westbrook here. You've seen more usage for Westbrook than Harden going back the last few months when they've played together. You've really seen it since Covington came over too. Westbrook getting more drives per game, a usage rate up over 37% in those games. So I think that They are really comparable, and I prefer the lowest owned one. I do think that they're two of the best plays on the slate, though.
Since the start of January, so since the start of the new year, Harden has a 34% usage rate, 1.57 DraftKings points per minute, 33% assists, 10% rebounds. I mean, they're just elite numbers. Westbrook, 35.9% usage rate, 1.57 DraftKings points per minute, the same, higher usage, 35.6% assist rate, and an 11.1% rebound rate. He's literally tied or higher than Harden in every fantasy relevant statistical category since the start of January.
Yeah, and obviously, the argument against it would be, that it's just it's a short-term trend and it'll turn around. But I just think that with the personnel and the way that Houston plays right now, it benefits Westbrook so much. You have teams scheming to get the ball out of Harden's hands because he'll kill you if you don't. So I don't really have trouble buying into this being a much more even split between these two than it was earlier in the year.
I mean, let's not pretend that his entire career, Westbrook hasn't been a ball dominant, I'm getting mine type of player anyway. And one of the reasons they can coexist is because who else is there?
Right, exactly. I mean, you're talking about, like I said, since the Covington trade in games that Harden and Westbrook have both played, Eric Gordon has an 18.5% usage rate. That's the highest outside of Harden and Westbrook. Covington's at 17, House is at 14, Tucker's at 8. There's nobody else taking shots.
No, it's when Westbrook or Harden decides that they're trapped and they need to get the ball out, you just better be ready. I mean, I'm serious. If you watch this team, they're just gathered around the perimeter, and you know what I mean? Seriously, Daniel House, Ben McLemore, just be ready. If it comes to you, knock it down. And they've done a pretty good job of it. But no one, when you set up in the half court, Daniel House isn't expecting the basketball. That's just kind of the way it is. So my point isn't that I think Westbrook is a better fantasy player than Harden. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is he is. I'll leave it at this, Adam. I just think they should probably be the same price or closer than a $700 markup for James Harden, given what we've seen recently. And hey, you know what? It is a short-term sample, but we're not talking 3 weeks here. It is still 2 months. It's still almost 800 minutes for Westbrook and 860 for Harden. So we can get something out of that. So, all right. Anyway, by the way, you mentioned it. You kind of just hit on it quickly, but Cody Zeller is starting for the Hornets. Anything else for the Rockets?
Yeah, I like Covington here. I think that even though the price tag has come up, the rebounding numbers look really good for him since he came over, which, obviously makes sense. And I think this game has the potential to just be a really competitive down to the wire game where you get a little bit more playing time than normal. So I don't think it would be surprising if you got 36, 37 minutes from Covington, especially with how many guys there are for him to defend on the Clippers as well. I think that, even though the price tag is getting up there, I think that there's still a little bit of value in Covington.
All right. Still some meat left on the bone.
Yep.
All right. Fair enough. Let's talk about the Clippers. Ball gets spread around a lot. Feel like a broken record discussing this team, but we'll have to get a little bit more into the weeds than normal because only 4 games. Lazarus Taylor says, Laffy, don't forget about this Pat Beverly Westbrook beef. Yeah, I guess we'll see. Bev's minutes have been super low. Screw it. We'll start with Pat Beverly. They're very slight favorites here. And like I said, a 237 over under. Pat Bev, though, he is cheap. Could this be the game? Now, I'm going to go out on a limb, Adam, and say that this could be the game where Patrick Beverly gets up to playing 30 minutes again. Because in terms of what is more advantageous to this Clippers team, is it getting a little bit more instant offense from Reggie Jackson, or is it having very solid on-ball defense from Patrick Beverly against guys like Westbrook and Harden who are playing 37-plus minutes a night?
Yeah, I agree with you. I've kind of been going back and forth on trying to figure out how to project the minutes for these two because you've seen them more or less splitting minutes. Last game, you actually got more playing time for Jackson. He finished at 25 minutes to 20 for Beverly. But I agree that there's plenty of offensive production coming from other guys on the Clippers. You don't need Reggie Jackson's offense. And they do need, as many good defenders as they can get out there in this matchup. So I do think you get a little bit more run for Beverly. He is really cheap. The problem, obviously, that you run into is that he's still not going to get any usage on this team, but he's cheap enough. He's only 3,600 on DraftKings that even though he's getting some ownership too, I would still rather go to Patrick Beverly than PJ Tucker.
Okay. Brought my car in to get detailed at 9:00 this morning. They just call me now at 5:35 to tell me it'll be done in 10 minutes, but they close at 6.
That's helpful.
I mean, what the fuck? I mean, hey, you got to be here in 20 minutes all day. Ridiculous. I mean, that's, I have reason to be a little bit disturbed by that, right?
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
All right. Just want to make sure I'm not the one in the wrong here. All right. So let's talk about Kawhi then and Paul George and Lou and Harold. I'm not enamored with all of them, but we'll start with Kawhi Leonard, who, as we've seen, and you and I mentioned it earlier this year, very early this season, that like Kawhi was on pace to post historic numbers. And I think we had both acknowledged that, yes, these will settle down once Paul George gets back and they get healthy. No question. But we would expect him still to sustain some of it. And this is what you've seen, Adam, and I'll toss it over to you. 33.5% usage rate, career high by more than 3%. 27.4% assist rate, career high by almost 10%. 12% rebound rate, right around his career high. So while we've seen a decrease from like the 40% he was operating with earlier in the year, this is still the best year statistically and from a usage and assisting, facilitating standpoint for Kawhi than we've seen, well, really his whole career.
Yeah, and I have no issue projecting him for 34 minutes here. I think that he could play more. We'd seen games recently where he was getting up to 36 minutes. This game, I think, just has, especially compared to the other games on the slate, such a high likelihood of being the one where you're just getting a ton of run out of these guys. He's played 27 games this year with Paul George and Lou Williams active. He's averaged 1.43 DraftKings points per minute, still has posted a 31.3% usage rate, 25.5% assist percentage, and just shy of a 12% rebounding percentage. So still putting up really, really good numbers. The salaries come down a bit. And I want as many pieces of this game as I can get to. And giving me a $9,300 Kawhi is, I think, one of the best plays on the slate.
So do I. And it's seldom that we're really that you're that high on Kawhi Leonard, but today's circumstances are a little bit different. How about the rest? Let's round out the rest of the Clippers.
So Paul George is really cheap. I have him at 31 minutes here. I didn't want to go higher than that, but I do think there's a chance that this is the game where he gets back to normal. He played 30 minutes 2 games ago, played 27 last game, lost about 3.5 minutes to the blowout against Oklahoma City. So he's been trending towards 30, 31 minutes. I think that it really just comes down to, how much is Doc Rivers willing to put him out there, but his salary is cheap enough. He's priced to be playing, around 28 minutes. So I think there is, even if you assume he's limited to 30 minutes, he's a little underpriced, and there's at least there's more than a 0% chance that he just gets full run again and that he becomes one of the best plays on the slate. So I still really like Paul George. It seems like the field does too. Right now, projected to be the highest owned guy on the slate. I don't really have any issue with that though, because I don't think there's a lot of downside to his price tag. The one thing I mentioned it earlier, because we've already talked about Beverly being a reasonable value option, but I think JaMychal Green at only 5% ownership is someone that I'll be taking shots on in tournaments, because I expect the Clippers to go small here. We saw last game against Oklahoma City, which isn't even a small team, but you saw the closing lineup, and it was only out there for a couple of minutes before they pulled everyone in the blowout. But the closing lineup didn't have Harold, didn't have Zubats. It had JaMychal Green. It had Reggie Jackson, Kawhi, George, and I think it was Morris. I think there's a really good chance that you're getting a closing lineup in this game that is, one of the point guards, Lou Williams, Morris, Kawhi, and George, or maybe JaMychal over the point guard or whatever. But I think that you can get a few extra minutes for JaMychal Green. I have him in for 22 minutes here. He's only 3,300. He is a better per minute guy than PJ Tucker is at a lot lower ownership at a cheaper price tag. So he's someone that I like taking a shot on in tournaments.
All right. 2 down. It's funny. Whenever we have 4 games, I'm like, shit, man, we got to cover an hour. And, well, 5:40 and we're through 2 games.
There's a lot to talk about on this slate because there's so much uncertainty in rotations and who's playing and stuff.
I know, it's crazy. All right. So, okay. So you've got Philly and you've got Sacramento. Kings 5.5 point favorites, completely shorthanded Philadelphia 76ers team. I mean, my God, they are awful. Just ask Josh Engelman. On the season, he said he tweeted something today that I found funny, basically saying, like, if they end up winning the finals in 7, I deserve a ring, meaning him. And,
right.
and I kind of get you on that. They're 28-2 at home, 9-23 on the road. I'll mention this every single time they lose another game, just to continue rubbing this in, not just for Josh, but how dreadful it's been as a fan. The Kings will be without Rashawn Holmes again, or at least we're expecting him to be out. He's doubtful. Marvin Bagley's no closer to returning. Harry Giles, well, he's actually finally seems to have earned Luke Walton's respect and is getting decent enough minutes on a pretty consistent basis. What about De'Aaron Fox, though, who is expected again to play? It's funny. There was a quote about him earlier today or last night saying how it's taken him a while, but he's finally getting used to being the lead guy here, the face of the franchise, and he's played well. I mean, I don't know if you're going anywhere with him as the face of your franchise. Sorry, Kings fans, but he's playing pretty solid basketball. Can you get any interest in him today with a $8K price point on DraftKings and 76 on FanDuel?
I think the hardest thing for me as far as getting the Fox is that the value on this slate is so bad, and I like the guys at the top so much, specifically the guys from the Clippers Houston game. I think it's going to be tough to get to an 8K guy in Fox because I really am not going to like the other side of that 2v2 where it's like Fox or a cheap punt or like 2 cheaper mid-range guys. I think I'm going to be preferring the other end of it. I haven't built lineups yet, but I think that it'll just be tough to get to Fox for that reason. I don't think it's a bad matchup for him. I think obviously that he's a good player. The salary has come up a little bit though. You're talking about, him being $1,800 more expensive than Rozier, $2,200 more expensive than Graham. He's obviously better than those guys and projects a lot better, but I think that they're going to play similar minutes. I think that the ceiling is similar, and I just dislike the cheap value so much that I think it's going to be tough for me to get to a lot of Fox.
Is it going to be tough for you to get to other players on this team? I do want to talk a little bit about Harry Giles. The per minute production is solid, but the price tag is getting to a point where it's really hard to get enthusiastic about 24 to 26 minutes, potentially less, maybe more, but it's unlikely. Buddy Hield on DraftKings has fallen below $6,000. I guess that's interesting, but it's far less interesting when you consider the playing time that he's been getting, and $5,600 on FanDuel. The interesting thing though is that as far as Luke Walton goes, we had a pretty good idea of what minutes were going to look like with this team. And then Buddy Hield goes to the bench. Alex Len comes to Sacramento. Dwayne Dedmon, who knows what the hell was going on with him before and after he was traded. And now things aren't nearly as clear with a number of guys that were rostered pretty heavily earlier in the season.
Yeah, so I think that the Kings give us an opportunity to get to some high upside guys at low ownership amongst the mid-range players. You mentioned Hield, and the minutes clearly are down since he went to the bench. He's playing 23 to 26 minutes in most games. But since going to the bench, he's still averaged 1.24 DraftKings points per minute. All you have to do is look at that game against the Wizards the last time out to see how high his ceiling really is. He had like 30 DraftKings points in the first half. Granted, he barely played in the second half and finished with like 32. But he's capable of going out there and being such a potent scorer that he has a high ceiling at low ownership. There's obviously risk because of the minutes, but I do have interest in Hield if the ownership stays down. And then the same thing goes for Giles and for Alex Len. Last game against a small Washington team, we didn't see close to 48 minutes from them. The game before that, you got 48 with 28 going to Len, 20 going to Giles, who was in some foul trouble. But at only 4,500 for Len and 5,400 for Giles, I don't think their median projection is really that great for the salary. But I think that the range of outcomes is wide enough since we don't – the minutes for these guys vary so much from game to game, and they are good producers on a per minute basis that with them not getting much ownership either, that's the type of play that I like going to in tournaments.
Okay. So who would you say your top tournament options from the Kings are tonight?
Healed number one, and then Giles and Len.
Okay. It does feel like this could end up being one of those games where Alex Len plays 26 minutes and he ends up putting up big like the Boucher game from a couple days ago. If this happened with Alex Len tonight on a less extreme level, it wouldn't be shocking because
I mean, we got it like 2 games ago.
That's what I'm saying. Against Detroit, he played 28 minutes. So it's not like you're hoping something can happen that hasn't happened before.
Right. And he doubled the game before that, I think.
2 games before that against OKC, he played 21 minutes. He had 11 and 11. So yeah, I think in tournaments, this is one spot to be exploited. And you would agree, it could very much go wrong.
There's no question it can go wrong. But again, like compare him to a $3,700 PJ Tucker. I understand the price is different and that it might cost you like a player that you have to kind of downgrade a little bit. But if you can get to Len versus Tucker, the ceiling is just so much higher and he's so much lower owned. It's a case where medium projection doesn't really matter when you're talking about someone like PJ Tucker, where he's not volatile at all. So it's really unlikely that he exceeds his medium projection by all that much, whereas Len has a really, really wide range of outcomes.
I was going to say, let me give you a more apt comparison in a similarly priced Cody Zeller, but then I remembered Cody Zeller has power forward eligibility on DraftKings.
And Cody Zeller's not that popular either. I prefer Zeller to Len.
Yeah, so do I.
Yeah.
But I don't think Len's minutes upside is really any lower. The probability that he gets there is lower, but we saw it the other day. So yeah, Cody Zeller on DraftKings, 12% right now. Alex Len coming in at 5%. Both of these guys for a 4-game slate, that's minuscule. Let's talk about Philly. You and I discussed it on the early bird last night. It's remarkable that Alec Burks, continues to play very limited minutes. It's crazy. But here we are without Josh Richardson and Ben Simmons in the backcourt. Alec Burks is still getting 25, 22 minutes last time out. I don't know what to make of it. I actually want to start with him because if he's only going to play 22 to 25 minutes, then we have to go ahead and assume that we have, and if Thibault starts, we have to go ahead and assume that, first of all, Shake Milton, who was in serious foul trouble last game, plays 35 or so minutes again, maybe 33, probably 35 minutes, honestly. We have to assume that, Furkan Korkmaz continues to play around 20 to 23 minutes, but more than anything, Shake Milton probably gets huge run here, and I don't know. We'll see. Glenn Robinson had a big game off the bench last time. Mike Scott and Matisse Thybulle started. Who knows what to make of this Sixers team right now? And I wouldn't be surprised to see Brett Brown. Keep this in mind. Would not be surprised to see Brett Brown shake things up again tonight with them on this wicked losing streak, being down several players still.
Right. I don't feel very confident in exactly who starts, but I do, obviously you're going to get Horford, you're going to get Harris, you're going to get Milton. And Milton, should play big minutes. I think that on DraftKings, he's not that appealing at his salary, but at 5,400 on FanDuel, he looks good. Obviously not going to shoot at the rate that he has been, but he will take shots. He will play big minutes, assuming he stays out of foul trouble. So he looks okay. Mike Scott projected for a lot of ownership, which again is just a function of how bad the value on this slate is. But he did play 36 minutes last game. And if you extrapolated his minutes from the second half of the game that Josh Richardson got hurt, he would have played 34 or 35 minutes as well. So I don't feel super confident giving him 34 to 36 minutes, but based on what we have seen in the last couple of games, that's the route that Brett Brown has gone in each of those games. So it's at least obviously something that is reasonably likely to happen. And he's the same price point as PJ Tucker as well. So I think that's an okay value. Burks, I just have trouble getting to more than like 24 minutes for him since we haven't seen Brown be very interested in playing him. Glenn Robinson's price tag has come up to where it's pretty risky because he's not a great producer and the minutes are volatile. He played well last game and got 31, but he's barely been in the rotations recently as well. So I think that, Milton on FanDuel, Harris and Horford, and then Scott as a value on DraftKings are where most of my exposure will be going to.
Nick Rahal had a couple pointers, a couple plays that he likes in chat. I just want to get your opinion on him. He says, Ariza, Doncic, Portis, Edwards, all cheap guys. Tatum. I'm not sure who else. Oh, Nance and Sexton. How do you feel about those guys tonight?
I would try and get all of them in the same lineup. It might be tough because I don't know if the salaries will work out, but definitely sounds like a tournament winning lineup.
I like that. That must be a Thrive fantasy thing tonight. I don't know. That's wild. And is it possible that someone that opened it up yesterday, like opened up the tab and like forgot about it and then came back today thinking that it was today's slate?
Or
Like
maybe
actually looked at yesterday's slate, you know?
Yeah, or like had that typed in and then like left it up and hit enter just now.
I don't know. It's bizarre, man. Round out Philly for me. I'm honestly, dude, I don't have any clue what to make of them. I told you the same thing last night. Nothing's changed despite doing research into them. Like Harris is going to get opportunity, 20 plus field goal attempts, far from out of the question. Shake Milton, I wouldn't fret last game. He had 4 fouls early in the third quarter. He's going to play a ton of minutes and get a lot of shots, but his price is up there. I guess rank these guys for me. Oh, and by the way, Brett Brown said he was trying to get Horford the ball in the block down low, and it just did not work out. I mean, it looked really ugly. Maybe he'll have an easier time against the Kings than he did against that big LA front court, but it wasn't a very pretty scene. So worth
one other thing to point out from last game was Harris was in some first half foul trouble. He only played 33 minutes, but I think you typically are getting 37 or 38. He's averaged 1.12 points per minute without Embiid or Simmons. So I think he looks good. I think Horford looks good, expecting around 34 minutes. You can roll the dice on a Mike Scott value play, and I like $5,400 Milton on FanDuel.
Nick, my apologies, buddy. He was talking about how he did yesterday.
Oh.
I was going to say, that's because I saw someone respond to him. They said, "You're a day late, Nick." I said, yeah, you are. All right. My fault, Nick. My fault. That's funny anyway. Anyway, hey, if you guys enjoy the show, hit that thumbs up. It's the easiest way to help support us. And as you know it, we really do appreciate it. It does a lot for us, no question. And as we say every day, we appreciate you making this a part of your routine, whether it be the strategy show, the deeper dive, live before lock, whatever it is. We're glad to have you with us each and every night. Anything else for the Sixers?
Nope.
All right, let's close it out. Before we do, our deeper dive is all one word to get you 50% off your first week of Awesemo Plus membership. From ownership projections to player projections, the boom bust tool, all of our premium articles, the lineup builder, running out of breath. You get the Fantasy Cruncher add-on that's separate. But if you go to awesemo.com/join, when you sign up, just make sure to use the promo code Deeper Dive. One word, get you 50% off everything for the first week. You can get an idea of whether you like it or not. You're going to, but I have to preface it with that. And get 50% off in the process. So check that out. Deeper Dive, one word. We'll see you over there. Oh, and when you sign up, when you come over, hit us up, say what's up in the premium Slack chat. A bunch of guys and girls talking DFS 24/7. All right, Golden State and Toronto. Let's round this one out and hand it over to the Live Before Lock crew. You've got the Warriors at home, 9-point dogs. Steph Curry, he's back at him, and Steve Kerr is going to give him 24 to 28 minutes. I want your opinion on something first. I have an opinion on this, but I want your opinion on it. I have an opinion on everything. So Steve Kerr says, basically, these fans are loyal to us. They come to every game, and they're paying to watch a team, and they're paying, and the face of the franchise, if he's healthy enough to play, should play. I actually agree with him. I heard Stephen A. Smith saying he doesn't agree with him and Curry should be able to do whatever he wants to do. But if Curry wants to play and Kerr thinks, hey, you know what, this is the right move, I have no issues with that whatsoever. And he basically said, like, if injury risk is the concern, then I'll never play him. So I don't know. It's an interesting kind of thing going on there with them so far out of the race.
Yeah, I mean, I have to assume that Curry wants to play. Otherwise,
right, exactly.
Right. Otherwise, you could treat him like Draymond Green and sit him every single game that he feels any sort of like pain whatsoever.
So Draymond Green, since the start of last season, 1.01 fantasy points per minute with Curry on the floor, 0.94 with him off. And this has been something you and I have discussed a lot, that usage doesn't change. Assist rate might come up a little bit, but he is not a more efficient player with Curry or any of these big guns off the court, because that's not the type of basketball that Draymond Green plays. And it's evident. So how do you view him tonight? And we can get into Curry as well. Let's bang both of those out. And then I'll throw this to you as well. I'll let you hit on all three and we'll move over to Toronto. Andrew Wiggins. I don't know how many times you and I have said this, but it bears repeating. With Karl Anthony Towns on the floor this season, he had a 53.5% effective field goal rate, 47% without him, 1.17 fantasy points per minute with Towns, 1.02 without him, meaning he was not good as the go-to lead scorer on that team. And we've seen some similarities in Golden State. With Curry back, that might change things. So Adam, Stephen Curry, Draymond Green, Andrew Wiggins, floor is yours.
So Draymond's still questionable. No idea if he even plays, but if he does, I'm still not really interested.
They just re-signed Dragon Bender to a 10-day, so it could suggest he's going to be out again, but I don't know.
And they have plenty of bodies now to where even if he's back, I would expect, 29, 30 minutes from him. And he's not really that cheap. It's not like it's a great matchup against Toronto. So still not really interested in Draymond, even if he plays. Curry, I think, is somewhat interesting. He's projected for 10% ownership right now, which seems like where it probably should be. He's played 112 minutes this season, 30% usage rate. If that's the case, it doesn't get it done for me if you're expecting 26 minutes at 8K. But last season, he played about 250 minutes without Clay or Durant. He had a 44% usage rate. I understand you have Andrew Wiggins, who's going to take some usage now. But outside of that, there's nobody on this team that
1.72 fantasy points per minute.
Right, exactly. There's nobody outside of Wiggins that's taking usage from Curry here. I don't know, if he plans on going out there and just chucking up shots tonight or just kind of looking to, ease his way in or what. But just the fact that you could potentially get 26 minutes of a guy with a 38 to 40% usage rate at low ownership on a 4-game slate has some appeal, at least.
All right. Yeah, if Curry plays 28, I don't know, man. It's so tough because he's not that expensive.
Right.
Somebody, it's funny. Someone in chat made a pretty good point a minute ago. I'd like to give them credit, but it's moving quickly. Jojo218 said Curry basically played 30 minutes in most games because of blowouts. Now, obviously that's anecdotal and not entirely true. There were plenty of games where he played more than that. But how many times did we see Curry play 3 quarters and drop 60 fantasy points and 38 real points with 10 threes?
Right. And that's why I think he's interesting is that how often on a 4-game slate do you get an $8,000 guy with Steph Curry ceiling
Exactly.
and nobody wants to play him?
Exactly. I said something similar about Lillard yesterday. Did it come to fruition? Not necessarily. Was Damian Lillard more expensive? Yeah, but we also know that Damian Lillard could have come back and played monster minutes. But it's a similar situation here. Lillard had 22 points, played 32 minutes. You didn't get it. But if Curry plays the high range of that 28, maybe gets around 29. Remember, this is not a lower body injury. You could be really wishing that you had him. And I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah. And even if he does play 26, he can go out there and just hit his first 7 threes and he's paid off his 8K price tag.
Hunter says, lucky for him, he has the same teammates too. No wait. Last year means not much. Look, I'm not going to argue your point there. Obviously,
well, no, I will because.
Well, hold on. Let me finish and then I'll let you take over. He doesn't have Kevin Durant. He doesn't have Klay Thompson, but you've got Draymond Green. You've got Wiggins. You're still going to be a 30+% usage player. It's not to say that. Do we expect Curry to just be a shell of himself? I don't know. Go ahead.
No. Well, I assumed he was talking about what we were saying with the usage last year, and I think it is basically the same because you're just talking about a ton of low usage guys outside of Wiggins, where if you're talking about the minutes that he played last year without Durant and Thompson, it is pretty comparable to this year.
Yeah. Look, by the way, another issue here is, who else isn't there anymore? A 30% usage player in D'Angelo Russell as well. And D'Angelo Russell played all of the first 4 games that Curry played this season.
Right. Yeah, I think that Russell and Wiggins are kind of decent proxies for each other. And, Curry had a 30% usage rate in those games. But I also think that that's like a median usage rate that you're talking about too. Like there's going to be games where it's just so much higher.
All right. Anything else for Golden State? And then I'll let you close it out with Toronto. But this is one where we're going to let the live before lock guys cover Toronto a little bit more. Maybe we get some news. Sometimes Toronto gives us early news, which is nice. But right now, let's just assume I don't know what Gasol's out, Ibaka and Van Vliet are in. It's so hard to tell.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have a good feel for it. As far as Golden State goes, I don't have anything else beyond what we talked about. For Toronto, I think the best thing I could really say right now is the way I'm approaching it as far as on late swap sites. FanDuel, it's up to your risk tolerance. Do you want to project those guys in or out? What are you comfortable with doing? On DraftKings, I think the way that I'll approach it is to project Ibaka in, because I can very easily, if he's ruled out, if he's in, I think he's a good play. And if he's out, I can very easily swap to Boucher or Hollis Jefferson, whoever's starting in his place, and adjust my lineups accordingly. I'll project Powell for huge minutes, like Van Vliet's not going to play. And the reason there is because he's $100 more expensive than Van Vliet. So if Van Vliet is starting, I can swap Powell to Van Vliet, or I can, just kind of blow it up. But that's the way I'll be approaching it on late swap sites. I think that, it is a good spot for whoever's starting at center, whether that's Ibaka, Hollis Jefferson, or Boucher. I think that it's a good spot for Pascal Siakam, regardless of who is in for Toronto, but where he's similarly priced to Kawhi, I prefer Kawhi.
All right. Anything else here?
Nope.
Well, that'll do it. Thanks for hanging out as always. It's been a fun one, man. Killed that whole hour on 4 games. It's not that difficult to do anymore. You guys in the chat make it most of you guys definitely make it easier. Appreciate all of the interaction. It makes the show a whole lot more fun. You guys in premium Slack chat as well. We'll see you back here closing out the week tomorrow. I'm off. Adam will be back with Alex Baker, Awesemo himself. Coming up next, you know what it is. Live before lock. They're taking you up till 7 p.m. Eastern time. You've got Eddie. You've got Spags. We'll see you next time. It's the Deeper Dive presented by
SuperDraft.
welcome to the Awesemo.com live before lock show. Got ourselves a 4-game slate today and one where we still need a lot of news to know exactly what we're doing today. But I'm Chris Spags, joined once again one of the smartest men in NBA DFS analysis, one of the men who you would want on this 4-game slate to find an edge, Mr. Fast Eddie Fear. How you doing, Eddie?
I'm doing well. And yourself?
I'm good. I'm ready for this, and I'm ready also for a nice super draft slate today. Once again, of course, they are the presenting sponsor here on the Four Corners, God damn it, on Live Before Lock, and also the short form video of the Four Corners. But also their tournaments lately, there have been a lot of overlay on super draft. So in addition to all the deposit bonuses they have to offer you on there, there's a million ways for you to make money right now at superdraft.io or by downloading SuperDraft from the App Store. To do that right now, use the promo code Awesemo10 when you sign up to get $10 free with no deposit, $20 with under $100 deposit, and $30 with over $100 deposit as well. So check it out. The Jump Shot Tournament has $5K up top on there. And SuperDraft is a very simple site. You pick any players you want with a multiplier effect. And Eddie, I know this is real fast, but one thing I want to ask you, because you have worked in this industry for so long, you talk a lot about overlay and savings on rake. If SuperDraft, let's say, fills only 2,000 out of their 2,400 entries in their big tournament tonight, how does that advantage a player just to be having lineups in there overall?
Well, they're taking in that example 5/6 of whatever their total handle was going to be. So that would probably be slight overlay by a few percent. I don't know their rake charge offhand, but I'm presuming it's in that 15% range. So instead of, say, playing on Draftkings or FanDuel tonight, where tournaments play and you're going to pay in $1 and get paid out 85 cents or so, there you would pay in $1 and get paid out $1.03, and that's more important than just about anything you could do to prepare to be profitable in a DFS contest. Again, I frequently look at DFS as sort of climbing a hill where you've got to overcome whatever the rake is. Had a interesting conversation earlier today, and another one with our CEO, if you will, Tom, the guy in charge of this company, where we touched on a lot of topics. It was a great conversation. I really don't feel like I have enough of them, because getting everyone's perspective it helps me understand a little more about everything. But someone was saying that cash games are basically dead, and on your average day for NBA, I don't think that is the craziest take I've ever heard, where there is a number at which it's going to be dead for everyone. Your degree of skill versus the field, should you quantify it over a significantly large sample, is going to be plus some percent. So let's say you think you're pretty good, you're going to recover 10% on average. The rate gets to 11% over a long sample size, you're going to take the loss there. And I would think very few players can pay the cash rake most of these days, with everyone having excellent projections and all the information that's out there. So I think that's a not unreasonable take. But again, SuperDraft, they're starting already walking slowly down the other side of that hill in the situation you detailed there. So yeah, overlay is the greatest thing in the world. Again, when I was legally allowed to play, I played every day for about 5 years, and absolutely chasing overlay was, or at that time there were a lot of promotions. There was, sort of rake back more or less if you played it enough of volume, and you could get, there were places where you were getting paid to play, and that would be the situation as you outlined, where they're actually knocking a few cents off. So certainly my first priority above the site I liked or the pricing I felt best with, or where I'd been historically the most accurate, was instead to chase those places where you're paying less rake or no rake or getting paid to play. So all BS aside, a good analogy is the beginning of fantasy football season, where there tends to be several sites that are trying to make a name for themselves. So even though they know they can't sustain it, they run $100,000, $500,000, $1 million tournament, where there are people who don't play on, I'll name drop one, Yahoo, who basically, I believe at least 3 consecutive years, runs out some ginormous goddamn tournament the first week with a 10 max. Now, I think they raised that in the middle of the year this year, but with like a 10 max entry that they cannot possibly fill, and every dollar you put in is worth $1.23 or something. That should be stop one, full stop. So, yes, setting aside the fact that I enjoy SuperDraft, I enjoy the product, I enjoy that it's excellent for both novice and advanced users, if you will. The fact that it can be advantageous financially really puts it over the top as a destination for me.
Yeah, and for people too who just want to play different lineups out there, just to give you guys a preview, usually we do the Super Draft show on the nights where it locks 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. Not doing that today. Their slate locks 7 p.m. because we only have so many games to go around. But you've heard it from the horse's mouth, not to call you a horse, Eddie. Is this horse, this filthy horse?
Mr. Ed, I would presume.
But here are some top plays right now from Awesemo on SuperDraft. Pascal Siakam with a 1.35x multiplier. Tobias Harris and Al Horford both with solid multipliers with their the Sixers absences with Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons still out. Kyle Lowry, number 4. Paul George, number 5. So just a few guys you can start building your lineup with tonight on SuperDraft. They designed it to make it as simple as possible for you to find plays, and there's an edge on there right now by just having good projections like Awesemo's, being able to go on there and play. So just go on superdraft.io, use that promo code Awesemo10 right now. All right, Eddie, let's talk about it because this slate's an interesting one where not a lot of great values, some chalky plays I feel like you may be able to poke some holes in. So let's go that way then, because people want to hear your takes on Mike Scott. PJ Tucker also apparently going to be chalky. So out of the chalk plays that we have projected with our ownership projections at Awesemo.com, which people can get for themselves if they use the promo code live before lock at Awesemo.com/join, which guy do you feel like is going to be highly owned chalk as value that you think is not a good idea at all? And pick anybody. Doesn't have to be Tucker or Scott.
Yeah, I'll get there in a second. I got 7, 8, 9 references between Twitter, Slack, and YouTube chat asking why can't I play. And someone last month accused me of hiding this detail, which is odd since I've mentioned it publicly in front of thousands of people like 25 times. But my day job is for a content provider in the industry. I work with a European DFS fantasy sports provider. So I'm actually publishing contests. So similarly to someone who works at FanDuel or DraftKings, I am enjoined both by my employer and those sites and the laws of the state I live in from playing in DFS contests. So the only reason I host these shows, as opposed to still grinding it out on my leather ass, so to speak, is the fact that I am legally prohibited from playing. It's against the law for me to play. I'm actually honored to be attending, presuming the state isn't shut down. They just declared a state of emergency, but I'll be going to California, Los Angeles with my good friend Rinpak to support him for the FanDuel Live final in just 7-8 days, I think. And they have a contest there that is a free roll for just the +1s and the people themselves. And I'm not allowed to play in that. They've already let me know. So that is why I am not allowed to play. That's what I was referring to.
And you were counting cards with all your DFS players. That's
I've been kicked out of a casino.
You were like 1 basketball player, 2. There's 5 basketball players here. That strikes a chord.
Yeah, I'm hoping to pick up a good game of, a good pickup game of hoops and maybe some karaoke. That's my real goal for the LA trip. And also we get to go to the Lakers Rockets game. It's a sweet deal. I'm excited.
Perhaps we'll find each other's paths there because I'm not that far from Staples Center, but we'll figure that out off the air.
Okay. So you want to talk about
let's go back to it. I'm curious your thoughts here on the chalk because people really do want to know your thoughts on the chalk, and you are something of a whisperer of bad chalk. So just looking at that right now, who do you feel like is looking like bad chalk on DraftKings first? And if you want to cover FanDuel after that, that's also fine by me.
I would say the worst chalk nominally on DraftKings is probably the 20% we're holding on Patrick Beverley. I think there's a number of things that have me concerned with that entire team. They are fully healthy, as is Houston. One of the things I find intriguing about that game is this should be a playoff game. It's very relevant for seeding. Both these teams are, for all intents and purposes, 100% healthy. This is an island game for everyone. By the way, if you're looking for back-to-backs, you can stop. There aren't any. Nobody played yesterday. Nobody plays tomorrow. Every single team is playing on the island, which is nice. For certain things. I guess you lose some advantage because there are teams that you can move actionable information there. But this fully healthy Clippers team is going to be a jumble of as far as how the usage works out. This team fully healthy is scary with as competent of a bench unit as they have. But they have now a backup with Reggie that they're very confident in. You have Markieff picking up some bit of that, Marcus picking up some bit of that extra usage there. You obviously have George getting healthier, obviously picks up his usage. Kawhi can be an absolute monster if he wants to go out and be there. Lou Williams, who can play point and can take a lot of shots in that second unit, but he occasionally gets some time next to Beverly. Harrell, who can obviously get it really going. So Pat Beverly already not super high usage guy. You like the pace, you like the close line, you like the not on a back-to-back, but they have spoken several times now about protecting him a little bit more. And he's gone through a number of health issues this year. So I have him at 21 minutes, which I'm fairly sure is markedly lower than other people who are projecting this game. There are people who talk about the fuss with Westbrook. Beverly doesn't really get any extra fantasy goodness by getting his stuff going. So even if I were to grant your precept that he's super jacked up and good to go for this game because of Westbrook on the other side of the ball, I don't think that would really change much for me. I guess maybe some sort of additional steals upside. I guess maybe he and Westbrook are going at each other more, and so he's near the ball more, which would lead to greater steal opportunities. But I have him for less minutes than Reggie in this game. And that will be interesting to see. But contextualizing some comments, I'm worried that comes out low. And even if I miss and he gets 28 minutes, I'm not super fussed about not getting Pat Beverly and his likely 22 fantasy points in his 28 minutes. Not a guy who spikes a real upside. Like we talk about chalk a lot, and it's for good reason. The smaller the slate get, there's an interesting sort of inverse dynamic tension where the ownership on fewer games obviously rises per player. So factoring in ownership in your decisions becomes, in my opinion, more important the shorter the slate gets. 14-game slate, you want the guys who are going to score the most fantasy points, and pivoting off 7% owned guy to 4% owned guy really isn't doing that much. But there's the inverse tension there, if you will, mathematically, is the fact that there are fewer chalk options of any value. So you frequently end up pivoting to really crappy guys because you're trying to get, there's only 4 games. There's only so much value. So when you go from the highest owned guy to the 5th highest owned value guy, you are taking much more of a projection hit. So every given day you have to look at the numbers, and sometimes there isn't a good guy to pivot to. I do think there are good guys to pivot to, and we'll get to that here today. But last night I was not a fan of any of the cheap chalk. You can start with Kevin Porter. We'll ignore that one. That obviously went sideways, and bring your jersey, and he got hurt, but that obviously killed people. But that on a slate of that size with all that value, 40-odd% for him, 50, I think some places. That
90
was,
for some of us.
Yeah, like that. I'm sorry to hear that. But that projected very nicely, but it didn't project 7 points better than the other 5K guys. It was 1 point and 2 points and 3 points. And just over time, having 50% in tournaments, certainly, cash is a separate conversation, is not going to work out to be correct in my opinion. But yesterday the chalk was Wagner. I was negative on that. I said I wanted less than that. Didn't get there. It was okay. He didn't kill you. He got low 20s, I think, at the end of the day. Denzel Valentine, I made a point of saying, no, I don't want to get there. Wanamaker made a point of saying, no, I don't want to get there. All those guys. And I was like, why don't you play, I don't know, Bobby Portis, who is going to be whatever owned. And so there's, I do think chalk is still overowned. Over the course of the year, people are getting smarter, and that's another trend to keep in mind when you're talking about the value of late swapping. Early in the year, there are more fish in the lake, for lack of a better term. There are more people who just don't know what they're doing, people who like to play DFS and then get into the season and lose all their money by December and they're gone. So the field gets smarter as the year progresses. So the value of swapping late depends on a lot of things, but one of them is really the month you are sitting in. So it is one of the reasons I enjoy DFS is that it's a dynamic puzzle in that way. But probably Beverly is the one of those I can just see failing enough where, yeah, I'm going to let other people take that shot, I think. PJ Tucker is
going
also
to go to Reggie then, or are you just finding him like he pulls enough of a way? Because you would think with the matchup, and I think sort of my thought and what I've heard throughout the day is that Beverly gets more minutes. I don't think he's more productive with his minutes per se because of the reasons you mentioned. Like, what's he going to do? Steal harder? I think that's a fair assessment. But defensively, like, what are Lou and Reggie going to do for you? Maybe Reggie has more defense in him from his OKC days that we haven't seen recently for the Pistons. But that'd be the reason I think that maybe Beverly can get more minutes. But so. The question again, would you just go to Reggie instead, or was that just like just avoid this entire?
No, it was I would have. I think the not ubiquitous, but the somewhat over prevalence of Patrick Beverly does make Reggie a better play because you are getting immediate leverage on 20% of the field,
sure.
Who every minute that Pat Beverly doesn't play, Reggie conceivably will play. I expect him to get pretty close to splitting 48 there. I don't think we get, that much weird Shamitness and so on and so forth. he should spend all his time, backing up at the 2, if you will. But it's not a priority for me to get to Reggie. This team is going to really narrow out to a lot of guys with the usage getting really closer to 20. Kawhi's obviously going to stay well above that. He's one of the best in the world. Paul George will stay above that. But this whole, Lou, Reggie, Morris, Harrell, Williams, those guys are struggling. And it's because they play really well as a team. I have some concern Doc as a player's coach. Beverly says, I feel great. I want to go out there and sit on that guy the whole game. Like, I'm not shocked if at the end of the day I see that happening. But I think it's a little more likely that they limit Beverly to, I have him in the low 20s a minute.
Okay. No, that seems like a fair take. I guess going to then, if you're not getting that savings with Beverly, where would you feel comfortable getting your savings? Where are you willing to go to Mike Scott, who's playing pretty big run as a starter there? Are you willing to go?
I prefer Scott to PJ Tucker at a few higher percentage under, and Beverly being the third of our chalkiest value plays there. I would prefer Scott. I do think they trust him, and they're out, several guys. He even missed a few minutes in the last game that he normally would have gotten run. So I have Mike Scott at 34 minutes. And I'm slightly more comfortable in the production and feel slightly better about the matchup that I still would have less of Scott than we have him projected for. We have him at 25%. But if you're telling me I have to start a lineup and I need to play a guy in those mid threes and I can play Tucker, Scott, or Beverly, I feel better about Scott than the other two at his ownership. I would try to get under on all of them. One of the issues I face not actually building out the 150 and doing this more of a hypothetical standpoint is I'm not sure that I could get as much below as I would like to, because obviously I like Russell Westbrook and James Harden, and I like Kawhi Leonard quite a bit, and I like Nikola Jokic quite a bit. So trying to get those guys in significant numbers of lineups, I might be like, crap, I really need to play at least one of these guys in every lineup to make that work. But as far as cheaper options, I would rather play Daniel House. It seems at this point that they're still going to roll him out there and give him his 30-plus minutes. We have him, half own some of these other guys. Yes, it's $200, $300, and $400 more expensive using DraftKings pricing. Cody Zeller, another guy, 4,300. I have him at 23 minutes. That they've generally been adding up with whomever starting, and frequently Hernan Gomez. I've almost cracked the Borrego code, if you will, for what's going to happen at center. I sort of spoiled, like, no, I think they're going to go back to him today, and there's some method to the madness here, but they are intentionally sitting guys. Like Biyombo's he's not on the injury report, and then someone posted doubtful. I just think that's their way of saying dude's not going to play. So I think there's a ceiling for minutes where you could get 26, 28 out of Cody Zeller. Obviously, you're out there dealing with Nikola Jokic. So Cody Zeller, another cheap play that I would put on guys I have some interest in. Hernan Gomez, obviously only for tournaments, but in that same game. This is all assuming we don't get weird news. I'm intrigued by JaMychal Green. This is the fourth and final meeting between these two teams, but their first one since, I believe, pre-Christmas. So we had a very front-loaded Clippers-Rockets schedule, and not someone I could really run out there in cash or I'd feel great having a ton of exposure to, but we got a couple very big JaMychal Green games there, and that's because it's someone they can run out at the 4 or 5 who can still guard the line fairly well for this team. So I have him actually for one more minute than Patrick Beverly. I would have some interest in that in tournaments at 3,300. I'm trying to think of other than that. Eric Gordon, not incredible for me, but in tournaments, certainly a guy you can take and make some shots, especially if your alpha and beta options on the team are covered a little bit more. So I would try to get under those guys, and I would really try to backweight your later games as much as you could, because there's a real chance of value opening up on Toronto, Golden State, depending what happens with Draymond and so on and so forth.
So while we're talking about value opening up and some uncertainty in the air, this is something I would hope we'll get the answer before lock, given that the game is the first one to start. But the Devontae Graham, Terry Rozier situation, we got about a half hour left here. Graham's still questionable as of last check there, and the status for him is very important. Rozier going to get a lot more work. Didn't go off necessarily as chalk the other day, but had a perfectly competent game. Usage rate was up, assist rate was up. All the things that you want to see from him are there. It's a tough matchup, though. So how are you handling that situation right now, particularly with FanDuel, where people are crunching lineups? Are you putting Rozier in the hopes that Graham is out? Are you willing to take stabs at Graham? Just how would you want to handle that right now?
Well, here's the thing. It's not a tough matchup anymore. It's just not. Denver's been bad defensively. Bad. Like I went back through and watched. I was watching recently. I started with the Jazz, and I was just watching their defense. It looked actively bad. And here, I'll run. Hold on. We'll go NBA.com, advanced stats.
I mean, I know because I update my rates every day, and I know they're up to a 107 defensive rating. Earlier in the year, they're at 104, so it's just been trickling up since then.
Like, I think it's even worse than, I mean, if I'll pick a sample. Let's see what we got here. We'll go with them. Defensive rating. We will look at the last 5 games. Yeah, and the other one that I was going to talk about was Philadelphia. And I mentioned in the chat about an hour and a half ago, the premium Slack, if you will, for our super subscribers who we love so much. I mentioned somewhat aloofly, Philadelphia was horrific defensively. They are, over their last 5 games, relative to every other team's last 5 games, the worst team in the NBA defensively. The second is the Utah Jazz. The 7th is the Denver Nuggets. And this is not what has been a loaded Nuggets schedule as far as teams they have been playing against recently, where I think that would be a reasonable number to put up. Their last 5 games were the Pistons, who are incredibly slow, and I think we can agree not an offensive powerhouse. The Timberwolves, okay. The Clippers, that's an extremely good team. The Nuggets, it's an extremely good team, and the Warriors. So over their last 5 games, which included games against the Timberwolves, the Pistons, and the Warriors, they're 7th from the bottom. So I would say that's a slightly easier than average, and they're not passing the eye test anymore. This has to do with fewer minutes for Millsap and a little more gimpiness for Barton, and Harris isn't at 100% relative to where he was early in the year. Neither is Murray. Jokic's role in the offense and him being a little slower than he was just like a month or a month and a half ago when we got peak New Year's Jokic. That's come off a little bit visibly to me, but it's not a tough matchup anymore. Like it just isn't, and I think that's one reason that I'm somewhat more inclined towards these Charlotte players. Now we don't know when we're going to get the news on Devontae Graham, so my degree of appeal for Terry Rozier will depend fairly heavily on that. If that news comes out in 5 minutes, Rozier is going to end up being massively owned. He's priced very well for a game without him. And I'd be a little more inclined to pivot. If we're lucky enough to get that news at 6:55 Eastern, then I just think you go there. If you don't get that news, I want to look at Zeller really doesn't factor in here. You want Graham out, but it's not going to be a significant bonus for you. But this is sort of a 4-headed monster, if you will, most days on offense, where you have Graham and Rozier taking the A roles in the offense, and then you have the 1As or the Bs being Washington and Bridges, and those guys aren't going to get owned in what is perceived as, and I've read several times today, a tough matchup with Denver. It is a slow-ass matchup with Denver. Not disagreeing with that. This team is not going to move fast. This is the second meeting for these two teams. I think they dropped a hot 186 in the first meeting. So yeah, not looking for a lot of points to get laid out here, but you would have enough more clustering of the offense on Rozier, but also a still relatively lowly owned Miles Bridges and PJ Washington, where I would intentionally overweight those players in the instance we get Devontae Graham out. It obviously makes me feel better about spending the money, most predominantly for Cody Martin. Again, Cody, the better Martin. He's not that much better of a play today relative to his brother Caleb because of the pricing discrepancy between them, but the minutes are more solid. I will hazard a guess Caleb has not played more minutes than Cody Martin in a single game this year. But then that would move Caleb Martin, who is already in play for me, to a fairly strong play, and that would put Jalen McDaniels in as someone I would get to in tournaments at that point if Graham is out. If Graham is in, my minutes projection for McDaniels is low enough. I don't think I really get any there, and on that team I'd rather go to a couple other guys. And Martin is still fine to play. I would still have him at some 29 minutes, but the combination of the lost usage would take him out of strong consideration for me.
Also, to your point, we got a tweet from Lottie Dottie while you were talking. One of our regulars here who tweets us a lot on Twitter.
Sure.
Got a tweet from Rod Boone, who's the Hornets beat writer for The Athletic, with a quote from Mike Malone saying that he was fired up pregame. He's ticked off their lack of defense and level of play. I'm going to treat these guys like grown-ass men, which they are. If they can't handle the truth, they're in the wrong business. So a little bit of Jack Nicholson in there in that quote. But
yeah, so I don't think that's really actionable, but it's very interesting, and I'm glad he's also noticed. Again, it wasn't. I didn't check the stats and then try to double check it. I watched the game and went, "This is awful." Like they would have made that cover 4 times out of and they've missed it every single time tonight. What the hell's going on with this team? Then I went and just looked at some numbers a second ago with you, and it's been fugly. Same thing with the 76ers, by the way. Which again, you're losing Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, who are 2 brilliant defenders, and Josh Richardson, who's well above average. So this should be no shock to anyone. But I do think it's probably not as clearly stated as it should be that this 76ers team is bad defensively. I mean, bad. Like,
the defense obviously is one thing. They're playing at Sacramento. They've certainly been giving up some decent production against them recently, but I want to know your thoughts on the Sixers offense and some of their guys, their core guys here. Particularly, apparently we didn't talk enough about FanDuel for some folks out there. Shake Milton, a value play on FanDuel today, not quite as value-minded on DraftKings. I don't see getting to him a lot, or at least more than the Fields. 16% projected for him. But Tobias Harris and Al Horford, I'm still very interested in. I thought Horford had a shot to be useful against the Lakers. He didn't quite get there, but it's been there for him. Booster there for him. We talked about Mike Scott. What are you getting out of the Sixers if you're playing lineups today?
Quite a bit, I imagine. So let's sort of start at the top here. Apropos, well, aside any particular statistics, I think in this particular configuration, Horford will perform better than he has, and Harris will as well. And there's a couple. We have a blowout game that took into this consideration. We have Shake Milton taking 20 shots, which isn't going to happen frequently. We have, slightly weirder rotations a couple games. I expect them to both be better than they've been. I still like both Tobias Harris and Al Horford quite a bit. I have them both as double A's. I think they're both quite playable in cash. I'm not concerned about the matchup. And I think in GPPs, they both carry massive upside still. I'm not surprised to see 50 out of Horford to 60 out of Harris today. Neither of those Horford can get there so many different ways in a matchup that I consider very positive, dealing with the likes of Jen and Lyles and all sorts of Len and Giles. I think I said Jen and Lyles.
You were close. You were close enough.
Not particularly. I was like, Lyles, he plays for San Antonio. Anyway, but I don't know what our ownership currently sits on those guys, but I don't think it's high enough. I think there is a chance you get crazy, think Jason Tatum last night game out of Tobias Harris. Not Tobias Harris, not the defender he is, not quite the offensive player he is, but he's pretty good and can get there. Like he has on teams with well more NBA quality players than this one, put up 60 fantasy point games in the past. And even on this 76ers team with fewer guys missing than 3 of your amazing starting 5. These two teams also played earlier this year. Not a terrible amount to glean from that because it was all hands on deck for the 76ers in that game. They had Simmons and Embiid and Richardson. So, my individual rankings on these guys would maneuver a little bit one way or the other based on exactly who's starting. You'd get a little cookie for guys like Horford and Harris in the event you get, let's say Matisse Thybulle out there starting again. You'd rather have Glenn Robinson out there than Furky. Shake Milton on FanDuel, and we'll do a good FanDuel segment for a bit here, but Shake Milton on FanDuel, I like quite a bit as a bit more of a cashy play. I expect him to be fairly well owned if you want to check that number for me, but he's been shooting over his head. He's been shooting over Steph Curry's head. Like he's shooting. I have no idea.
Top 3 owned guy on FanDuel. He's 35% in the most recent run.
Yeah, I would probably try to come in marginally under that. I'll look at point guard on FanDuel in a second and contextualize how reasonable of an expectation that is. But we had one game where he just had super incredible usage, and then we had a couple other games where he just shot 70% from the field and 75% from 3, and just not all that is going to stick over time. Obviously, the opportunity is fine. I don't mind the matchup whatsoever, although the Kings. They're not Toronto and they're not the Clippers, but they're probably the third best team defensively on this slate tonight. It's not.
Also, Devontae Graham will play now. So.
Okay, so let's see, 6:34 Eastern time. I like it on DK at 58. I don't have much of an issue getting there. The ownership will remain low. I probably, due to the pace and what I expect to be some lingering over ownership, end up a little over or a little under rather on where we ended up with Rozier. I'm less inclined to make the pivots towards Miles Bridges and PJ Washington, but sort of non-news there, other than those particular observations. Sure. Talking about Denver a little bit more there. I rank them fairly well. I have a fair bit of appeal for most of the guys on this team. Some of it is very simple, as in none of these guys have a particularly bad matchup. And it's just a very short slate where, the only guy on that team who's starting who doesn't have a real slate smashing upside in what's a strong matchup is Gary Harris. Like, you can get an absolute ass-kicking game out of Jamal Murray. You can get 50 out of Jamal Murray tonight. I'm not shocked. Now, the number of guys on this team who are going to do it, probably a little limited by the pace, if nothing else. But you can get 60 out of Jokic tonight. When they beat him up the first time, I think Jokic played 29 minutes and was very good in 29 minutes. And neither Cody Zeller nor Bismack Biyombo nor Willie Hernan-Gomez does much of a very good job on defense at all right now. So there's really no limit to his ceiling there. Comparing him with, say, the Houston guards and the forwards on the Clippers is an important point, and we'll talk about that relative to ownership in a minute there. But Jokic's upside is evident. Murray's upside is, to me, evident. Cooled off recently after a real hot streak, but there's no reason he can't get there tonight, and there's no reason Will Barton can't have a good game again. Price is hung up a little higher than I'd like to. Again, obviously not super excited with the pace, but the ownership is low because he's been crap for a couple weeks. But he can get there in this team. So I would try to make sure I have some ownership of these guys that don't feel great. And I'm nominally more excited about Will Barton relative to, say, I probably have them actually Bridges, Barton, PJ Washington between those three guys right now with how I expect this game to play out. And I probably like Millsap a little more than all of them. We've been getting a couple minutes with Jeremy Grant at the 3 playing next to him. But again, island game, which is very relevant when I look at a Millsap situation specifically. 26 minutes, you can get 37 fantasy points out of Paul Millsap. Guy picks up steals, guy picks up blocks. He can do all sorts of stuff. I don't want to overexpose myself to this Denver team. I really doubt I want to, but I probably want one.
Okay. No, it seems fair. Barton, I think, too, could benefit a little bit from the rebounding that he sometimes strikes his upside from. With Jokic being pulled outside, I think kind of the same thing with Millsap. Jokic being outside of the paint as much as he is, you think there's going to be some more boards to go around against a pretty weak Charlotte interior. We got a question here from Tedious as well, which I guess is relevant. I don't see why this would be related, but he's asking, would Zeller be affected at all with Graham playing now? I guess the whole rotation was kind of upset by no Graham last week, but I would think Zeller wouldn't be affected at all meaningfully. But you want to confirm that, Eddie?
I don't think it's relevant.
Yeah.
I would suggest it is a minor downgrade, I guess, but I mean to the level of 0.2 fantasy points or something, which especially on a 4-game slate is not statistically significant. His shot projection would go from 5.8 to 5.7 for me or something, which would result in some because Graham is a slightly higher usage guy than the McDaniels / Martin, who would be in there instead picking up a lot of those minutes, but not super relevant. It wouldn't.
Graham also misses a bunch of shots, so maybe some more rebounds for Zeller. I'd say overall that comes out in the wash would be my gut instinct there. Let's talk about the Houston players a little bit because we kind of talked about them in passing, or you've mentioned them in passing, but I feel like we have to make the Sophie's choice here between James Harden and Russell Westbrook. And for me, I would favor Westbrook just because I do think the way that things are going to spread out for them. Frankly, the man defense we're going to see on Harden is going to be a little bit tougher than he'll normally get. We saw that, I think, play in last time that these two guys went against the Clippers, where Harden's usage rate took a pretty big dip. Westbrook's went up. He put 31 shots in that game. Maybe things adjust a little bit around, but I would favor Westbrook. But Eddie, tell me how you're feeling if you had to make the choice between Harden and Westbrook.
I agree. Today is the second day all year where I had Westbrook actually projected higher than Harden. I have Westbrook scoring more fantasy points than Harden. So at their ownerships, it is Westbrook, man. Your explanation was really spot on at this point. It basically comes down to it. The way they are running this offense now is just so open in the middle for Westbrook, who is marginally better at driving than Harden. So they just pick and swing, and they eventually get him in some sort of reasonably advantageous spot, and he crashes in the lane. But especially DraftKings with the extra bonuses, which he's slightly more likely to pick up. Like, I have Westbrook raw outscoring Harden today. So.
No, that's, yeah. I mean, you have them straight away. Awesemo has them close. I think most projections will have them close, but yeah, I agree. Like, just the way it shakes out, damn it, one of my crutches. The way that it breaks down for this team, I think the way that it's just Westbrook has looked like a different player ultimately is what it is for me. And the Clippers, I think, just going to defend Harden much better. The
Clippers switch very well, and their side rotation coverage is good. Their corner three coverage is very good, which is one reason I'm not super on PJ Tucker, because that is his shot. Someone asked a minute ago what I think about, what would happen if PJ Tucker got in foul trouble. There's actually an interesting sort of two sides to that coin. PJ Tucker has, I could be wrong here, but I don't think PJ Tucker has fouled out of a game this year, full stop. Now, I also think, and I'm not going to go look again, but I watched those games earlier today, I think PJ Tucker had 5 fouls in each of the previous games against the Clippers. I think all 3 of them. I'm fairly certain 2 of them. I think maybe the third. So that's an interesting question. You play some Jeff Green, who is, I believe, 3K flat on DraftKings and would play 48 minus Tucker minutes at center, which is the expectation anyway. Regarding center for the Clippers, it's a little interesting. I would rather play Harold than Zubac, and that's not someone whose number I call a lot recently, and he should come with all the caveats and concerns that I spoke about the Clippers just a minute ago. But he does carry a gigantic upside, and he can actually get it going. Just a little less likely that Zubac hits a ceiling for me. Also, Zubac, both of them do a reasonably poor job of getting out to the 3-point line, but Harrell is the better of those two. I think there's a chance they collectively play 39 minutes or something. So I'm going to play Zubac. I'm going to play Harrell if I have to choose between those two guys, but I would rather play JaMychal Green and get a guy at 4% ownership who I think should play 20-something minutes. Might get close to 30. And 4-game slate, just trying to get creative up in there.
No, that definitely makes sense. Going through any questions, see. We haven't talked much about the Raptors, and I guess it's a little bit hard to fully dig into them without knowing everybody who's available, but getting a question here about your thoughts on Kyle Lowry for GPPs. I guess also you might as well give your thoughts for FanDuel in particular, how you would want to handle Ibaka and Fred VanVleet, both being guesswork today for that, because those are clearly pretty crucial plays with how guys like Anunoby, Powell recently have stepped up, and also a boost on paper for Siakam and Lowry. So how would you handle the Raptors on FanDuel specifically, but also just in general?
Well, on FanDuel specifically, you gotta, ask yourself how things are going to go. I don't have a terribly strong lean as to who is going to play and isn't going to play. I think Ibaka is probably the most likely to play, followed by VanVleet, followed by Gasol, is roughly how I think I would lay them down based on things I've heard, and also degree of quality backups, and they get 2 extra days of rest if they don't suit up. The 2 players I ranked as A's in GPPs on DraftKings were Serge Ibaka, with the obvious preclusion that he plays, but I'm most confident he plays at maybe 60-40, and the strength of the matchup, and just price to production ratio, and Kyle Lowry. I would rather get to Kyle Lowry, especially if Draymond Green isn't. We obviously have some reasonable sample of not that long ago, Draymond Pascal work. It's a decent spot for it is a better spot for Kyle Lowry. Got quite a bit, and bringing Steph Curry back isn't going to change a lot out of that. So I like Kyle Lowry in tournaments. I think it's 86 on DK. That's a bit rough to get to, but I think again, one of the reasons I liked speaking to Tom tonight and last night and a couple others earlier today is you hear people speak what they're thinking, and I think if you ask people about this game right now, there would be a lot of, I don't know what's going on. So, there's just a very big hands-off thing. But it's a 4-game slate with potentially a couple relevant offensive players missing for this Raptors team, and it's not a back-to-back, and they really like to force-feed Lowry minutes. So even at that price, you can get 55 out of Kyle Lowry in 40 minutes. Now, you need the game to stay close. there's quite a bit going on there. But whether or not, I suppose again on FanDuel, if I'm going to take shots at questionable guy, it would probably be Serge Ibaka for me if I was going to play one of those three players. But I like Kyle Lowry as someone who will be a little bit too low owned based on that. It's worth sort of segueing to talk about Steph Curry too, because the presence or absence of Fred VanVleet would significantly change my projection for him. It's a very difficult matchup for him if you have Lowry and VanVleet on the floor at all times. Steph is on the floor, which would be a very real possibility at that point. Lowry is a great overall defender, much better at bodying, much better at guarding guys bigger than him than, say, Fred VanVleet. But Fred is one of the best guys at slipping screens in the NBA. And that was obviously critical in the postseason series with the Warriors last year. It was something we talked about a lot doing those playoff shows. But it's a little bit different because this team is slightly different offensively, less efficient at setting screens and popping stuff. Steph himself would say $8,000. I want to contextualize the minutes a little bit, unless there has been further clarification. The only thing I saw was the one shoot-around comments from Steve Kerr, where he said, well, he said probably about 25. Now, I've heard people say a 25-minute limit. That's not what he said. I have him currently projected at 26 minutes. I think he will beat 25 minutes. And normally if someone has a 25-minute limit, I project him for 23 and a half or something like that, because they will come in under sometime. His quote was, below 30 minutes for sure, probably in the 25-minute range. Okay, so we've put a cap on it. We're going, when he says below 30 for sure, that's 99% he won't get 30 minutes. That's fine with that. But probably in the 25-minute range, you're looking at 25, 26 as an average. Range is an interesting word there. So at this point being, people have said, 25-minute cap or 24-minute cap. I've heard both those are, again, unless I missed some additional comment, which is possible. I haven't seen it. I try to look for it. But absent that news is a little overly critical of how I'd view the situation. There is some chance that this game stays close and that's, a rivalry of relevance and they're back home and the crowd is rocking and Steph plays 28 minutes. There's a 25-minute limit. That's very, very unlikely to happen. Definitely, I think for sure, sorry, was his words, below 30 for sure, probably, doesn't mean definitely, in the 25-minute range, there is some leeway there for a bit more of an upside. So I like Steph Curry.
I have the exact quote, so just we could burn through it fast. Normally, over the years, our fans have watched him play the whole first quarter, sit out 6 minutes of the second quarter, then finish the half, and ultimately that's what we'll probably get to. But against the Raptors, we'll probably play him in 6-minute bursts and below 30 minutes for sure, probably somewhere in the 25-minute range. So, yeah, so that would lead you to believe then he gets what, 1 6-minute stint, then 1 6-minute stint, then so like we have him for 24 for sure.
It doesn't tend to be quite that exact, and they have used him rotationally differently over the years, and with their rotation this year doesn't actually that strongly resemble their rotation from years past. So it's a bit sticky for me to guess exactly. Like he usually comes in, plays 12, sits 6, plays 6, and ends up playing around 36 minutes in fully competitive, yummy games. I don't know exactly how they're going to go, and again, it could be 6, it could be 6 minutes and 25 seconds, which would throw your math all to hell. So yeah.
So, on DK, he's going to be 7%. On FanDuel, he's going to be, it looks like 11%. So we have projected for him, and ownership was just updated 6 minutes ago. So again, if you want to get that for yourself, awesemo.com/join, promo code live before lock. What would you do with Curry given those numbers here? 7 and 11-ish on DK and FanDuel respectively. Where would you want to be?
Maybe slightly higher. I would have a strong take on that. Like he would need to be obviously incredibly effective in a matchup that is not a good one for him. So, I believe the last projection I came up with for him was somewhere in the range of 26 minutes and 35 fantasy points. Okay. At 8K, that's not making my socks roll up and down, but it's not horrible. So there or nominally higher, I would think.
Yep. Okay.
Euro Siakam talk. I mentioned Siakam once. He's obviously in play on a 4-game slate. I would rather play Paul George and I would rather play Kawhi Leonard, so that would limit my degree of exposure. The prices towards the ceiling. But if someone said I'm playing Siakam, I'd be like, okay, cool. I don't think he would make the line in cash for me. I believe I ranked him as double Bs because of the other strong plays at his position and around his salary, who I like a little bit better in games I can project to be a little closer, a little faster. So, but it's Pascal Siakam can put up 55 tonight, and another game can blow out. So like I would certainly play some Pascal Siakam, but I personally think my exposure would be somewhere around 10 or 12%, and I imagine that's similar to the field. So didn't say much because don't have much to say beyond what I said before. That is, I would definitely want Draymond to be out. Him dealing with Juan Toscano-Anderson, who's an underrated defender, and Eric Pascal is something I'd like to see rather than Draymond out there against him. So that's my Pascal chat, but thank you for asking.
Yeah, I agree. And then Pascal, certainly if we get news that Ibaka's out, that's going to be a little bit of a jump for him. But his DraftKings price, I mean, he projects in range for me at his price. It's just a little tough to get to. I feel like at his price point, I guess here's a question for you, Eddie. Would you go Pascal or would you go Kawhi, knowing that Kawhi is going to be higher owned? But I just feel like Kawhi's floor is much better and the ceiling's probably also better in the game. It should be competitive.
It would depend exactly what the numbers are on the site you're referring to.
On DK, we've got
between
Kawhi
any
at 27, Pascal at 17.
I would play Kawhi then.
Okay.
It's not by an incredible margin. I like him more, but at that differential, it's close enough to be competitive for me. But at 27 and 17, in a vacuum, all else considered, so there's game stacking, which is more of a thing on a 4-game slate. I have a feeling I would be playing, a lot of pairings of I'm either playing Westbrook or Harden, or I'm playing Kawhi and Paul George, or something like that, where that would happen a lot. So in one lineup in a vacuum, given that information, I imagine I'm still laying down Kawhi at 27 versus Pascal at 17. If you had those numbers hold and had the swap room and the clock worked in your favor, and you could turn that into Pascal in the event Draymond is out and Van Vliet is out and Ibaka is out and all that, then that's probably enough to get me to make that move.
Speaking of, we got a question from Iron Maiden 2 in the premium Slack. Taking price into consideration, what game would you want to stack the most? He keeps landing on a lot of the Philadelphia-Sacramento game. I think price-wise, that would be the one that I would say is game stackable, but a short slate, maybe that game somehow goes in overtime or something like that. Is that the one you would think is the best game stack game? Or is there
I do think that's the one I would end on. I do think that game is underrated relative to how good the prices are, guys. And I like getting 2 shares of Bielitsa. I like getting the shares of De'Aaron Fox. Again, this defense is terrible. Like they're eye test bad. They're like, they were double take bad. Like I would watch a play and be like, that's not how you do that at all. And it's not surprising. You're talking about guys who, were not largely in the rotation and are now trying to guard some of the best players in the NBA. So, Fox, I don't think I really get to a lot of Giles here. The minutes are not terribly secure. Frequently, you're getting closer to a 40-minute split between him and Len backing up in one tournament lineup. I might play Len before playing Giles. It'd be interesting just because there is a very real upside there. We've seen it recently. Both would be in my player pool, but they're not guys I'm super excited about. And I think this could very possibly go small. Both those teams have shown that tendency recently. So, Bielitsa, Bogdanovic, Fox, not really. I mean, again, you play some Barnes. If you're playing 150 lineups, one lineup, I'm not going to have Harrison Barnes. That many lineups, yeah, I'll get there. There's a really bad defensive unit. You're going to get someone being very good on the Kings. So I imagine Kings 76ers is the game that I would be most inclined toward doing, as you say.
Speaking of, would you have anybody healed today with his minutes not recently topping 26? And he's kind of in the doghouse, but he does have upside. Showed a little bit of it against Washington, but hard to get.
Yeah, I'd have some. I ranked him. So I was, there was a day last week where I just didn't rank him, and people are like, what? I'm just like, I have no reason to think he plays more than 25 minutes. The price is too high. The price has come down to a more tolerable mid-5s level, and it's a 4-game slate. But yeah, on a full 9-game slate, I think it was, in a very good matchup, I just did not rank him. I'm like, there's no way he's going to math out for me at 6 and change. You would have to go apeshit crazy. There's just 28 players I liked more in that price range. Tonight is a far different kettle of fish. And the Kings, along with the Kings and the Hornets, probably the teams I'm overweighting the most here today, which feels inherently dirty to say, but That's what I got.
Why do you, this is just a random question, which hopefully you can answer fast, but why do you think Fox's assists are down so much? Is it just because of the groups kept playing a little more ISO ball or what? Because I've been kind of baffled by it. His assist rate's fallen off a cliff, at least in some games recently, and expected assists haven't been there quite as much either.
It's the relative efficiency and acumen of Bogdanovic in running the offense and bringing the ball up the court relative to Buddy Hield when he got expurgated to the bench.
Sure.
Non-comparable in price, but Harrell or Jokic on FanDuel. Someone super chatted $4. I got to give him his $4 worth.
Sure.
In a vacuum, I'm probably a little more inclined to play Jokic. I think Jokic is. I'm going to take a real quick look at FanDuel ownership because people made a very reasonable complaint, and got to do what the people ask. So I'm going to take a look at FanDuel ownership.
Well, while you're looking at FanDuel, we also got another super chat asking favorite FanDuel center for a $100 single entry.
It's a very well phrased question.
Yeah, we appreciate.
My guess is my answer is going to be Jokic because value is just less of a pain in the balls there. You have just lots of guys around 4K who you can squeak into lineups who carry an upside, whether it's Daniel House, Furky is priced much more reasonably. And again, something I'll try to do a process show sometime soon where I talk about, the real relative economy and how the lines converge when you get towards minimum price. But Furky is $4,100 on FanDuel, I believe. That's $600 off the floor. He's $4,500 on DK. That's $1,500 off the floor. That is more of a difference at their linear $400 difference in price points than a guy who's 10-4 and a guy who's 10 on opposite sites. So I guess the point being that Furky at $4,100 on FanDuel is even significantly better than it would appear at first blush there. I've got that. Now, those are the FanDuel centers. Now, this is the FanDuel ownership. Jokic, number 1 at 24%. Number 2, Marquise Chris at 15%. Zubac, number 3 at only $3,800 at 13%. Cody Zeller at 12%. I imagine I would play Cody Zeller at that point. Just looking at those numbers and not contextualizing how easy or hard it is to spend that money. Jokic getting up to 25% there. There's just slow ass game downside. There's blowout downside is very relevant. That game's 10-point line or something, I believe, maybe a little less. But I imagine there I play Zeller. I feel more comfortable doing that than playing the Zubac at 38, who can lose his time lots of ways. This is a really bad matchup for Zubac. I will be. I'll tell you how many minutes Ivica Zubac played earlier this year in the 3 games he played. I'm gonna guess like an average of 15 or something. First game against the Rockets, which was 102-93, by the way. Very low scoring game. Ivica Zubac played 10 minutes. In the second game, he played 13 minutes. In the third game, he played 15 minutes. I do not expect that to increase when that team went markedly smaller. Now, that doesn't mean it's impossible. Zubac has some sort of offensive game. Well, again, there's a lot of usage sharing, so this is unlikely, but Zubac going out and putting up 8 and 8 in the first 4 minutes is possible, but he doesn't strike me as. That seems very unlikely to me, so I would expect his minutes to still be very limited. So I'd much rather play $4,300 Zeller than $3,800 Zubac.
Also, right now, SuperDraft looks like it's going to have some overlays, so go check them out. SuperDraft.io. Get an entry on there while you can. Our boy Chelton Myers, who's a SuperDraft aficionado, playing on there, hopefully having a good time, asking for the lock on SuperDraft. Top projected play for Awesemo is Pascal Siakam, but I would say the lock for me would be Tobias Harris. He's number 2 projected guy for Awesemo, 1.45x multiplier. Use that promo code Awesemo10 on SuperDraft.
What was the number on Siakam? 1.35?
1.45 for Tobias, and Pascal's 1.35.
I would have, if I'm doing this correctly in my head, Tobias about half a point higher.
Yeah, Awesemo's got him about like 0.9 of a point higher, has Siakam about 0.9 of a point higher, but I just feel like for a lock, Siakam's got some ways that can go weird. I don't see how Tobias doesn't get where he needs to tonight, personally. That'd be nice. That's why I'm saying lock, but we never give locks here. There's no such thing as a lock.
Trying to...
You've talked about it before, but Iron Maiden 2 asking your thoughts on Millsap. Want to hit him one more time real fast?
I like him. He's not highly owned. He's 46 and 48 if memory serves. There's a real upside against a Charlotte team. There's an upside on both ends of the court against them. They turn the ball over a fair amount, especially relative to their anemic pace. He can get it going. I said I like him slightly more than the other guys I like from that game I'd like to take shots at in that forward position being specifically. I think I had them. I would say my order of appeal was probably Barton, Miles Bridges. Excuse me. Try that again. Millsap, Miles Bridges, Barton, PJ Washington was roughly how I would rank those 4 guys. But I like getting to Paul Millsap.
We are about to lock, but do you have any thoughts on Andrew Wiggins? I have a little bit of them, but I feel like he's not the most playable option with Steph in there doing whatever he does.
I think you have to have some on a slate this short. But I would probably still rather play Steph by a little bit, but I don't have a strong take either way. It is a poor matchup. Steph coming back, spoiler alert, does not help anyone else's usage, but it does help the efficiency of the team, and you can see it happening. So not a priority by any means, but he's in that Siakam range of, this is a guy where obviously I have to have some because he's a guy who carries a ceiling and is relatively low owned.
Do you have any thoughts on Alec Burks before we lock here?
Playable. The way they are using him in the rotation where he frequently does not enter until the beginning of the second quarter makes it a little less likely he gets I'm going off hot bonus and actually gets that extra time. So he's been disadvantaged by how they're using him. Like they're just better shot that Glenn Robinson gets to go first, so he gets the hot hand treatment. Brett Brown does a lot of the hot handing, and most frequently, if not exclusively, I'd have to check, but we've had Alec Burks coming in literally to start the second quarter, not getting a ton of the ball handling time, not the first guy in to relieve even Milton at the point guard. So, and the price isn't like $5,000 is more than I want to spend on Alec Burks with that degree of uncertainty. I like his game more than, certainly for a fantasy perspective, any of these other guys. I like it more than Milton's, and I certainly like it more than Furky, Tobias, again, for fantasy purposes. I really, not Tobias, excuse me, Thibault is what I was thinking. For fantasy purposes, obviously he's going to get a defensive stat game once in a while, but most of the time not an incredibly talented scorer. But I have trouble getting there because of the price. I don't know what it is on FanDuel offhand. I apologize, but it's $5,000 on DraftKings. That's a lot to spend for a guy who seems to be less likely to get the time than really any of these other guys. Like I have to take him for less minutes than Robinson and Thibault and Korkmaz even I have for a couple more minutes likely, and obviously Milton. So lower priority for me.
We'll do a quick round of daddy likes here in a second, but we've got one last question from Morgan, which is still relevant for DK. Would you go Fox or Curry on DraftKings? I feel like Curry's an interesting tournament play to have some of, but I feel like you just have to pick Fox overall, right?
What's our relative ownership on those two guys right now?
I know Curry was at 7 the last I looked
that
on DK, so Fox would be, where'd you go, Fox? Oh, no, that's projections. Hold up. Fox is at 13%, so still pretty low.
I would probably play Fox at that point. I do think the torpor of the Sixers defense is that unknown. Like I saw, multiple people today referred to Denver as a tough matchup and Philadelphia as a tough matchup. They're just not. I mean, just not. And Sacramento has looked much better offensively and much better defensively. If you did defensive rankings over the last reasonable time frame of 5 games or 10 games or a month or what have you, you're going to have the Kings higher than these other teams.
All right, quick round of daddy likes here because we only got one game to touch on. But Eddie, if you were to guess using all of that brain power that you have in there, who would be the number one owned player on DK's shoot around today? Your $12 tournament with $100K up top.
So no one talk about ownership. I'm going to close the chat in case someone does, but I have the YouTube chat up. Do you think Eddie uses punctuation via text? Guy can spit knowledge for 4 minutes straight with no pause. I think that's more.
Having seen you right before you put so much thought into your writing, but having seen you on videos and done so many shows with you, I would say I would guess you're a caps lock guy with no punctuation. Thinking very
that's me. I'm yelling.
Texting.
Yeah, I'm yelling all the time. I have no idea who's highest on.
It is in fact your guy, or I mean a guy frankly I like a lot too. Paul Millsap, 32.5%. Where would Daddy go with that one?
I'd be under. Knowing that, I'd be under. I would not have guessed him to be that high. I don't think I would have named him. I was going back and forth. I have a lot of guys. Like, you are going to have over 20% of Graham, Zeller, and Jokic at least.
Yeah, we had Millsap at 21, it looks like, and that's where I was. I got to 33 because I was like, 21 sounds good. I'll get more than that. And I
would have said 25 or 26. I mean, he has, I want to say 240 fantasy point games out of his last 4. He's like, you can just very easily savage that price. And what is a very, I mean, calling it a good matchup is a little bit insulting to how relevant pace is in this math. But yeah, So, okay, I guess you can just read them off because I sort of punted it.
Yeah, we'll burn through the rest of these. Nikola Jokic, 25%. Devontae Graham, 24.5. Cody Zeller, 22.4. Any of those guys jump out to Daddy?
Nope. I'm
Jamal Murray.
A little higher than I expected on Jokic. I will say I thought Jokic, because of the paucity of excellent value, was going to come in like the teens, because I think I think he ends up higher than Kawhi there, maybe, which is a little bit weird. Maybe not. We'll see. But, people spending up on Westbrook and Harden, all the value being kind of due. I didn't think he'd pick up that kind of number. So it's higher than I expected on Jokic, but I don't have a strong take on any of those numbers.
One thing I've been a little surprised by recently, given how sharp the field is on really all the sites, but DraftKings especially, never underestimate a good DVP matchup on the DraftKings app. For whatever reason, those have been really spiking. Like Naz Reid yesterday came through in a big way, but I feel like people were really chasing some of those recently.
I mean, this is 2 times in a row in which that's absolutely fine. It happens to be correct. I would sooner chew off one of my fingers than use DVP in fantasy basketball decisions. Like, it is probably barely accurate as opposed to inaccurate. Like, if here's the most useful statistic in the world, and here's something that is the opposite of the most useful statistic in the world, I think it might be here. Like, it might be barely positive if you used it over time, but it frequently is going to tell you something that is woefully out of context and depends on what you call a center. And so, anyway, but those are 2 very good uses. Naz Reid at $5,100 made a ton of sense. I liked him. He wasn't owned enough. And I've been talking about the relative strength of the Chicago backcourt and the incredibly crappy front court for that team. So that works. Jokic, this is still good. It's still a very good matchup for him. I consider it fairly nominal, the matchup relative to the pace. And what I mean is that the pace is so much of a negative, and Jokic's production is not very matchup based. So there are teams that are very good at defending centers, and I'm like, okay, this guy cannot operate against that team. He'll be out quick. He can't make that work. Jokic can do just fine again. Like, his degree of production would not be that strongly correlated with the DVP of the opposing center team. So it's fine here. Jokic is still very good, but that's one example of the relative value of how strong those rankings are. Really, it changes based on the player.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. Rest of the guys here: Jamal Murray, 18.7, Terry Rozier at 16. I'm also kind of surprised Terry Rozier was less than Devontae Graham, but Rozier at 16, do anything for you?
Yeah. If you had Devontae in the mid-20s?
Yeah, 24.5.
Yeah, but at that point, I would have rather played Rozier. It's just really funny how, and it speaks to a little bit, I think, given the exact same game and the exact same slate and the exact same circumstances in November, those numbers are swapped. Less people are trying to make the hot take, and less people are like, that's everybody being really clever. Like, that's actually too low on Rozier relative to Graham, at least. Like, I would have those guys projected pretty similarly at this point without even quantifying what degree of uncertainty we have in Graham, who should suffer some sort of projection minus for coming in questionable. So, yeah, I like 16% Rozier more than I think you said 24-25 Graham. So that's another interesting example of how people are the clever thing isn't always the clever thing anymore, I guess is sort of what ends up being funny about there. Yeah, like, I'm going to like some of the guys who are coming up here at single digit percentages. Like, you're going to have Bridges and Washington and, a couple of these other guys I think are interesting. I bet Cody Martin, who is still going to play, I think I have him at 29 minutes now, is now down at 5% or some number like that.
So we've got Will Barton at 14.5, Willie Hernan Gomez at 9, rounded up. PJ Washington 7.8, Miles Bridges 7.5, Cody Martin down at 7. So you're in the range there.
Yeah, and like I would try to intentionally get myself to even in the news that I think a big edge could have been gained in the news that we did have Graham out, where I would have been really happy to get to specifically Washington and Bridges, who would have gone up a bit. They'd have gone to 9% instead of 7% of what you said, but I'd have tried to go to like 15 or 20 because it really opens the door for one of those guys to actually take 18 shots. So I'm fine. I would still have nominally more, but I'd have been targeting closer to 10 than 20 at this junction.
We got Gary Harris at 7, Michael Porter Jr. at 4.2, Mason Plumlee 3.7, Jalen McDaniels 3.7, Monty Morris 2. Jeremy Grant are rounded up to Bismack Biyombo 1.5. I guess we don't know for sure that he's not playing, but that's
not a technical playing of oneself, but definitely in the ballpark.
Caleb Martin 1.5, Torrey Craig 0.7, Nick Batum 0.2, Caleb Bates Jop 0.01, Dwayne Bates. I don't even know.
Bates D-Up might.
Yeah.
KBD might not actually be available. Torrey Craig and Nick Batum are, I believe, technically in uniform with their teams. Yeah. Not sure either one plays. Craig a little more likely than Batum. Batum almost certainly won't see the court, so that's really close to playing oneself. But KBD, I want to check. Yes, he's down in the G League. You played yourself. Stop you right there.
I think we got some other ones. So we got Dwayne Bacon in 0.01, Joe Cheely at 0.01.
Dwayne Bacon is also done with the G. You're actually good. He's also with the G League. Joe Cheely is not a playing of oneself. Joe Cheely is in uniform.
Oh, he was available just in case Graham were out. But yeah, Joe Cheely not quite looking as good as the G League so far. And PJ Dozier and Ray Spalding also getting a little bit of ownership down there. Why not?
Spalding down. Dozier's good. Spalding also in the G League. Spalding, Bacon, and Simmons, I believe. The guys who were down, Kobe Simmons.
All right, so there you go. So we've covered who played themselves. Eddie, we've covered SuperDraft, the future of DFS, which of course people can get into for themselves at superdraft.io or by downloading SuperDraft from the App Store and using the promo code Awesemo10. Again, use that right now. Tomorrow there'll be another tournament with probably some big money up top. Decent chance of overlay because we're in the back half of the week, or at least decreased rate. So check them out right now, superdraft.io. Use that promo code Awesemo10 to get $10 free, $20 with less than $100 deposited, and $30 if you deposit $100 or more. Eddie, anything you want to plug or hit on before we call it quits?
I'm going to try to sneak up on him. Let's see if he's paying attention. This show is brought to you by
SuperDraft.
He's there. He's there. Tried to sneak it on him. Very good.
Josh is paying attention because he's waiting to get the hell out of here. Tune in tomorrow.
Just like I'm paying attention. I'm on the end stream button waiting for you to shut up.
Tune into the strategy show tomorrow. Josh revealing his handsome mustache. He wouldn't even show us before the show. That's how much this man is committed to a bit. So tune into the strategy show tomorrow morning here. Subscribe, hit the notification bells to know the second that Josh and Laffy go live tomorrow. And we'll be back. I'll be back with the Chubster. I'll get to see that mustache in live glory along with you live before lock tomorrow. So we appreciate you guys watching. See you tomorrow. Enjoy your nights. Good luck.